Waiting for Christine. Is Christine there? Councillor Christine.
I'm here. I'm waving at you.
Yeah, now I can see you there. You know, I was looking there because thank you. Christine. And, Keith is there. I'm just trying to.
You're now live, Councillor Ali.
Yeah.
We're going to start the meeting.
Yeah, Gemma, are we all right to go live now?
Yeah, you're live now.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Councillor Grange. I'm chairing the meeting today, being a vice chair. So, welcome everybody on this virtual planning committee meeting, which is due to current coronavirus restrictions on the public gatherings. I'll come to the members a bit later on to introduce themselves. And please, members, note the protocols of holding virtual meetings. Members to have their videos on at all times, but to put microphones on mute unless speaking. In case of technical problems, meeting will adjourn until resolved. If member loses connection, meeting will adjourn until reconnected. If technical problem persists and meeting is incorrect, meeting will be abandoned to a later date. When voting, members to state, I've heard the discussion and I vote to grant or refuse the application. To go by clock, members' personal computers, UK time GMT, and announce that the meeting is being videoed, audio recorded, and will be available, watch and listen to on the website. Now come to attendance by reserves. Please, is anybody reserving? Christine?
Thank you, Chair. I am a reserve, but I apologise that I'm not quite sure who I'm reserving for, but I am a reserve member of the committee. Thank you.
Yeah, reserving for Sachin Shah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming to the next, we got today 6 members to speak on 2 applications. Is Councillor Jogia, Councillor Lee, and Councillor Stephen Grief, and Councillor Moshenson. Now, next item is any declaration of interest, members?
Nothing to declare.
Nothing to declare. Thank you. Now I will request the members to introduce themselves. I start with myself, Councillor Grange Ali, Vice Chair, chairing the meeting. The next one I'll ask Simon.
I'm Councillor Simon Brown.
Keith Ferry.
Councillor Keith Ferry.
Christine.
I am Councillor Christine Robson.
Marilyn.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Marilyn Ashton. I'm the Conservative spokesman on the committee.
Christopher.
Councillor Christopher Baxter.
And Anjana.
Councillor Anjana Patel.
Right. Now we come to the minutes, last meeting minutes. Are you happy with the minutes? Last meeting minutes to be approved?
Agreed.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. We got one public question from Mr. Jeremy Clivers. Is he there, Emma?
I am here.
Your question, please.
My question is as follows. Committee members have a difficult task in balancing the interests of local communities and their legal responsibilities and the interests of planning applicants. I'd like to ask members of the committee how in fulfilling their responsibilities they seek to understand the legitimate interests and concerns of the local community.
Thank you. The answer is the members of the planning committee should and do so listen to the concerns of the community that they represent, and this is a material consideration. However, when determining the planning application before them, they are not merely representatives of their constituents. They are performing a function which requires them to balance competing interests, taking into account local and national policies, legislation, case law, and act in the wider public interest. Thank you, Mr. Clive.
Can I have a supplementary question to that?
Yes.
Okay, and this is directed to members of the committee and not just to the chair. And I know that application P349720 is a proposal to build a 12-storey so-called apart hotel in a low-rise residential neighbourhood. It would completely dominate the neighbourhood and skyline and overshadow and overlook many properties. The site's known as Vaughan Road Car Park. It will fail as a hotel, and despite the local need for affordable housing, will likely transform into a low-quality HMO if approved. There have been about 250 objections lodged through the council's planning portal and an online petition against it with 2,000 signatures over that now. Could members of the committee explain how, in addition to reading a summary of responses, they will engage with residents in seeking to understand their legitimate planning concerns? It's a question about engagement with the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clive. Because the application is not in front of the planning committee yet, but what I will request of the legal and professionals to write to you in writing and to respond to your supplementary question. Okay.
My question is directed at members of the committee, not at the legal representatives of the council.
But you will get a question on behalf of the committee members. Thank you. Okay, you'll get it.
That's not. I just record for the minutes. I don't find that a satisfactory response, but thank you anyway. But I'd like that recorded in the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
With all due
Yep.
I do not wish to be rude, Chairman, but with all due respect, I think that we can quite happily say to the gentleman that we can conduct site visits and hopefully by March, the end of March, we'll be able to do them in person instead of having to watch videos of what anyone wants to let us see. And of course, we can engage with residents and do engage. I have engaged with residents. What we have to watch out for is that we don't prejudice ourselves and be perceived as determining the application or predetermining the application. But I can assure you, speaking for members of my own group anyway, we're always delighted to engage with residents. And I think that's the answer you're searching for, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct. It'll be helpful to have the same sort of willing response from the other members of the committee, including Labour members.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. This is what I meant when it will come to the planning committee. The application will have a site visit if the lockdown allows us, and then we have also consultation with the local residents. So this is what the response I would recommend should go from the legal department and our officers. Thank you.
Sorry, Chairman. As the question was asked to the members, I would actually say to the resident who has asked this question that my stand is exactly the same as what Councillor Ashton said. We will ask for the site visit, and we will be engaging to whatever extent we are allowed to engage according to what Councillor Aston said. So that goes for me as well as one of the planning member. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patel. I agree with you, and in due course we'll have the site visit. We have the consultation with the residents, and then we'll go forward from there. Thank you.
And it would be helpful for the responsible legal services to explain the ways in which councillors can engage with the local community and listen to residents.
Yeah, fine. Thank you. We'll get a response. Thank you.
Okay. Again, I note no responses from Labour members of the committee, which I find deeply disappointing, given that we are represented in this decision by Labour.
It's not the Labour members. We as a planning committee will have a site visit in due course if under the current lockdown conditions, if they allow, and then we have a consultation with our local residents, and then we'll take it forward from there.
Okay, so I note you will have consultation with local residents, which will be very helpful. So you'll be able to meet some of local residents to understand their concerns about this proposed development.
Yes.
That meeting, I very much look forward to that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next item is the petitions. Nothing non-notified. Deputation non-notified. Reference from the council and other committees not notified. And coming to addendums, do you agree with the addendums?
Chairman, no disrespect, and I have said this before, and please forgive me, the original addendum came to us in good time, and we were able to digest it and read it, and it was very helpful. However, the supplemental addendum arrived very late. It is a number of pages long, and some of it was in answers to questions that we raised when we had our briefing, that's the Conservatives, on Monday. Now, I know that we've had an apology for the officers for getting back to us so late on these things, but it is difficult for members of the committee, many of whom have other things to do and have to come home from work or do certain things, to digest such a lot of information at the 11th hour. And I would respectfully request that in future we do at least get a supplemental in the morning of the meeting and not 2.5 hours before. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. It's noted. Yes, Councillor Patel.
I have a problem with the addendum coming so late. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to go through the supplementary addendum that has come through. And even if I do go through, it would take me a while to actually understand exactly what it is saying. Being planning is not, I'm not a professional planner or anything like that who actually knows everything inside out. So I'm only trying to do my job to the best of my knowledge. But if I am not given the information in time to understand, and I do take my job very seriously, I think I find it, I have to say it, I'm sorry to the officers, but it is unacceptable to have this kind of information just a couple of hours before the meeting.
Councillor Patel, we are going through a difficult time. The officers, everybody under a lot of pressure. And I note your comments, and I think Beverly would like to respond to that. Thank
Sorry,
you.
Chairman, when you say everybody is going through a lot of pressure, that applies to us as well.
No,
that doesn't mean we need to compromise our work, Chairman, is all I'm saying. We don't need to compromise what we are doing.
Let Beverly explain to you. Thank you.
Chair, if I might explain, we do apologise, and I believe when the addendum was sent out, Orla Murphy did apologise for the timing of it. There were a number of questions that required us to do some research and contact other members of the council, of the departments of the council, in order to give the full response that you had asked for, and I'm afraid that did take a bit of time. So your comments are noted. I do apologise for that. What I will ask the officers to do, Councillor Patel, in particular in relation to the application supplemental that came late, is to talk through that supplemental as part of the presentation, so that you will be able to fully take into account what that supplemental says. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. Now, Going forward, we got representation on two sides, and when time comes, we got two objectors and applicants, and then we got one backbencher speaking on Cannon Park, and on Animal Lodge. Then we got Bankfield Cottages. So when we'll come to to each application, we'll discuss it, and we'll ask the speakers and the objectors to speak for 3 minutes, objectors and backbenchers to speak for 5 minutes. Now, Beverly, can we start with now? First application, please.
Yes, Chair. Before we start, I just want to ask a clarification and ask members a question. As you know, the first item on Cannons Park was deferred from committee in December so that members could undertake a site visit. At that stage, we were in a different situation in terms of the pandemic, and the lockdown was in a very different position than, well, we weren't in a lockdown, we were in a tier 3 situation. As a result of going into lockdown, we had taken advice from public health, and a decision was taken that actually to do a full member site visit was not a good idea at this time, and instead we have offered virtual site visits, which members at briefing will have seen for 4 of the applications on the site at the moment. What I need to ask in relation to Cannons Park, in the light of the deferral for a site visit, are in the light of the virtual site visit that you were able to see at briefing, are you happy that you have seen enough from that visit to continue to determine the application that is before you this evening, that will suffice for the site visit that was requested? Chair, could I ask, please?
Yep. Thank you, Beverly. Before I have my comments, I would like ask Councillor Ashton to because she raised her hand. Please, your comments on that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, actually, I'm very grateful to Beverly for raising this before we get on and determine the application. She's absolutely right. The committee decided to do a site visit, and it's a physical site visit, that is, and it's only the committee that can unravel that or decide not to do it. But I'd like to also say a few words about 2 reasons why, personally, I think it's critical that this application is deferred. It isn't just about the site visit. I'll come to the site visit in a minute. The main reason why I don't think we can determine this application tonight is because, and I found it very interesting, there's been some interesting amendments to what is now called the published London plan. And what that means in plain English is that it's no longer a draft. It carries even more weight than it did, because other than one final issue, which has nothing to do with us at the moment, London plan is just about to be adopted. Now, the policy that has been altered, there's been a few, but the policy that's been altered that affects this application is policy D9, and it's called the Tall Buildings Policy. And effectively, and I won't read the whole thing out, but the change, which I've actually got a track version of it in front of me, is effectively that a tall building is now classified as anything over 6 stories high. And it won't have escaped our notice that this application, the whole application, is 7 stories high. So it isn't about the fact that it's only 1 story higher, it's about the fact that it's now classified as a tall building. And to justify granting that, and of course, the officers have complete autonomy, there can be no political interference in decision making. They come to their conclusions on a professional basis, and the whole reason for our existence as a committee is to judge those, and if we do not agree, we have the ability to overturn the recommendation to grant. Now, the officers have recommended this for grant on the basis, on a premise, but they can't do that quite in the same way as they did because of the alteration to this policy. And although the report, and in all fairness to the case officer, was written way before the change came about because it was published in December, probably after we last met and after we deferred for a site visit, which is a different reason. The problem is that if we go ahead and determine the application tonight, based on the report as it presents itself now, then we could be challenged because the report is wrong. You see, the officers can recommend this for grant if they want to, but what they have to do, they have to justify it in a different way, because there's no development plan that we have locally, not the site allocation plan, not a supplementary planning document or any other document that we have adopted that can justify putting a building that's over 6 stories high in a suburban residential area where there are no buildings of that height, and also opposite a Grade 2 listed historic park. It's very important that we understand the seriousness of this. So I would suggest, notwithstanding I'm not happy that we didn't do the site visit, in the sense that I agree that it needed to be postponed, but I don't think that TfL, or we don't need to worry that TfL are going to be that upset. We're all upset. There's all sorts of things that we can't do because of COVID, and doing a site visit is one of those things. I think that we may be able to do a site visit in a few weeks' time more safely. So I can't understand why we need to go ahead and determine this application tonight. I don't think it's acceptable to rely on a virtual site visit. It's up to us to decide what we rely on and what we don't rely on. And to add into the mix, I think that we would be at risk of severe challenge if we end up determining an application based on a report that does not take into account significant changes to the tall buildings policy. I think it's wrong, and I think that we would be in danger of ending up in court with a judicial review, and I dare say the Ombudsman will be interested in this. So I would advise members, and this is my opinion, and I say this regrettably actually, because I'd like to get on with this like the rest of us would. I think that we should defer this anyway. Hopefully, in a few weeks' time, all of us can have a proper look at this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. On my comments on virtual site visits, we have a very good, we did virtual site visits yesterday, and I really preferred it as compared to physical visit, because when you go on to a physical site visit, you just go. Sometimes it's raining, you don't enjoy it, you just go on one place and you stand there, you look around. But with this virtual site visit, we saw about 3 videos from different angles, not near the site, but far away. So until the circumstances allow, and we are out of the strict lockdown conditions, we can always go for physical site visit, but until then, I think for the safety, health and safety, for our own protection, to follow the guidelines of the government on COVID-19, because they're asking us to stay at home, not to go out. So I prefer that we should have in future site virtual visits, and then when the circumstances allow, hopefully in near future, let's hope and pray, then we can go on to physical site visits. On your comments on the policies on tall buildings, I would ask Beverly to please comment on that. Thank you.
Please forgive me, before Beverly comes back, I say this respectfully, I think you missed the point. I don't have a problem with the idea of seeing a video. It's just that we voted to do a site visit, and this is a major application. And the trouble with the virtual site visit is you're shown what the person taking the video wants you to see. If you're there in person, you can decide what you want to see. It doesn't matter if we don't enjoy it. It doesn't matter if it's raining. What matters is that we get it right. And this is a major application with thousands of people objecting. Over 600 have already objected on the portal. Thousands of people signing a petition. This is serious. And all I'm saying, given the fact that I know that there's been significant changes to policy, and there's no getting away from that, it doesn't matter what anyone says. All I'm saying is, I think it would be right to defer. But I think you've missed the point. I say that respectfully to you.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I feel very strongly about this, actually. I think, the person who seconded the motion to defer for a site visit at the last meeting. A physical site visit was voted on by councillors as a decision of the committee, and in my view, that should be carried out. Whether it has to be delayed by 4 weeks or 8 weeks is irrelevant. That should be carried out. I've been a full member of this committee since last April, and I was under the impression that site visits are a lever that the committee has at its disposal. But if a major application such as this, with as Councillor Ashton said, such a high level of public interest, doesn't warrant a full physical site visit, then I don't know what will.
But Councillor Baxter, when we agreed on the site visit, we were not under strict Tfo lockdown. So we have to look into that, and we took advice from our health and well-being officers. And I'll go back to Beverly also to comment on that. Now, Councillor Patel, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I actually disagree with you that you prefer virtual visit. I prefer personal visits, and especially on this particular application, we all voted for it. Now, if the things have changed for us, that we cannot make the site visit, then I'm sure same thing applies to the applicant, that the applicant can actually wait too until the site visit is possible. Now, not only that, I think it will also give time to the officers to do their report again, according and take into consideration the D9, condition. So I think it is in our interest that we actually defer this application. And as I said, I am always a person who wants to see things for myself and not what other person is showing me. Now, if it's raining or whatever the weather condition is, that's besides the point, but our job is, and we are entitled to have a site visit. And I personally feel that this application, with the interest that the residents have, we must have a site visit before any decision is being made. And as I also said, that report needs to be rewritten, because this is now obviously a report which not apply to the changes that have taken place, as Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. May I take comments from my other councillors? Simon, what do you think?
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I also normally in normal conditions prefer a site visit. I'm very happy to go around in sunshine, wind, rain and snow to look at major developments, not some of the smaller ones that we build in site visits for, perhaps. But in this occasion, I found that the video gave me enough information for me to be able to make a determination on all of the items before us this evening. So I'm quite happy on the virtual site visits front to go ahead this evening.
Councillor Robson.
Thank you, Chair. I am also feeling that it's appropriate in this instance to be able to proceed, having had a virtual site visit. I concur with Councillor Ashton and Councillor Patel that actually it is helpful to be able to go on a site visit, and it's not about whether it's raining. But I also agree with Councillor Brown saying that we should be going on site visits to major developments. I think this is a major development, but we cannot change, sadly, the conditions under which we are having to operate at the moment. So I am happy to go ahead. Thank you.
Councillor Ferry, you got your hand up.
Yes, I did. First of all, there's no legal requirement to have a site visit. Many other planning committees carry on without site visits. Secondly, it is a public space. You can drive up and park in the car park at Cannons Park and do your own personal individual site visit. And thirdly, we have to be very wary of the fact that this could, if deferred, run out on the time limit for determining this application and allowed the applicant to appeal straight to the Planning Inspectorate for non-determination. So I'm happy to proceed on the basis of the virtual site visit that we saw at briefing.
Councillor Ashton, you would like to come back?
Yes. We always get this, oh, we're going to go for non-determination every single time we ever want to defer anything. And I'm used to it. I've been quite experienced at listening to that. But I happen to have done quite a lot of homework on this, and the inspectorate are doing actually quite well on non-determinations and on determinations in general for non-major sites. And as we know, a couple of our overturns that luckily, Councillor Ali, you voted in favour of refusing. We were right and the officers were wrong. We actually had them dismissed. That's Maytree and Imperial Drive. So we should pat ourselves on the back for that. We got it right and the officers got it wrong. So they are doing quite well on those. But what we're not doing so well on and what they are behind on are majors, because they like to do site visits. And anything as significant as this would require quite a lot of attention. And what I'm really saying is this, and I think it's important to understand what I'm actually saying. I think a virtual site visit, it's not about whether it's better or worse. It's perfectly adequate for a minor development. And it's something that we just have to have a little look at. Something like this, we have to see it with our own eyes. It's not about that it's in a public. It really isn't. I find it actually quite worrying, the kind of attitude that's been shown tonight. Because if, let's say, the vaccine work and we end up being in lockdown for a very long time and we can't do a site visit for a protracted period, I can hear Councillor Ferry huffing and puffing, then that's fine. Then eventually we're going to have to come to it and determine the application, right? And I understand that, but I don't think that by March or April we'll be in the sort of situation we're in now. I'm thinking optimistically. When we proposed to do a site visit in December, we were able to do it. We weren't in lockdown, and I'm willing to take a chance that by the end of March we should be able to do a physical site visit. But it isn't. That's not the only reason why I want it deferred. I'm concerned about the fact that we haven't actually addressed the issue of the change of policy. So there's two reasons why it's in our best interest to defer this application. Now, we'll have to take it to the vote, of course, Chairman, and you know what? The ayes will have it. Whatever happens, happens. But I would urge the committee to think again very seriously about going ahead tonight. You know, hopefully we'll be able to do a site visit in person, and we can get the problem of not having anything in our development plan about buildings over 6 stories high in suburban areas that are not in our intensification zone. We've got to be careful of that. That's a change of policy, and it's significant. And the London plan now carries a lot more weight because it's not in draft. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ferry, you got your hand again?
Yes, I'd like to propose that we take a vote on this question, and I'd like to propose that we determine both applications with the benefit of having a virtual site visit provided to us, and that we don't defer them.
Is anybody to second it?
No, can I come in?
I have already proposed that, and I've already proposed, and I have a seconder. I have already proposed, and I spoke before Councillor Ferry, that we defer. So that has to be done first. If that is lost, then we can go on to his proposal.
Okay, we can take a vote on that. Yeah.
And I also want to say, Chairman, we have not seen the virtual site visit. So as far as I'm concerned,
You were offered, but
we disagree with it, and we want this application to be deferred. And obviously rewritten according to D9 policy. So I second what Councillor Ashton has said.
Chair, could we hear what the officer has to say on the other matter with regard to tall buildings, please, before we go?
Beverly, would you please come?
Yes, I will, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Ashton, for drawing that to our attention. There was an insert into the London plan as it was going through its stages that it goes through prior to adoption. It is not an adopted plan at the moment, but it does carry weight. And that was to insert a line to clarify what a tall building is, because it hadn't been there before. I'm sure you'll be aware that there have been a lot of changes to the building control system recently, in terms of the need to how the building control on tall buildings is regulated, and within the emerging building regs, they define tall buildings as 6 stories or 18 metres, and that has a very specific reason in terms of that. And one of those reasons is to allow the planning service to be involved at an early stage in any tall buildings in terms of means of escape and so forth. Nevertheless, it is a change to the London plan. It is a policy in terms of the number D9 that isn't within the report. But while the debate's been going on, I have been reviewing the policy in detail, and the policy requires us to assess visual impacts, long range, mid range and immediate views, the spatial hierarchy of the local area, architectural quality, to take account and avoid harm to the significance of heritage assets, buildings in the setting of a World Heritage Site, this isn't, buildings near the River Thames, this isn't, and reflected glare, and designed to minimise light pollutions. I can ask, the policy is not stated within the report. Nevertheless, the assessment required by the policy has been undertaken by officers. If members are minded to consider it, I would ask that it is minuted that we have drawn members' attention to policy D9 as a material consideration, and would add that as a material policy to the determination of the application. Conscious as I am of Councillor Ashton's comments about potential challenge, so she's absolutely right to draw this to our attention. I can absolutely ask officers to address in detail in the presentation the policy D9 and how this application, it's already been addressed. The report addresses all of these criteria. It will be for members to make a decision on that.
Thank you, Beverly. So should we take the vote on Councillor Ashton on your motion to defer it?
I suppose so, Chairman.
You mute, Councillor Ashton.
Yes, well, I propose that we defer for 2 reasons. One is that we need to do a proper site visit. We voted to do it, and I don't want that undone. And secondly, that I still believe, and with respect to Beverly, I understand what she said, but I don't think she's quite understood how serious it would be for us to go ahead tonight based on a report that we have understood very, very well, and on documents that haven't got anything written in them that address this issue. I don't think it's been addressed. I think will be challenged if this is granted, that is. And I will urge the committee to think very, very carefully before voting.
Yeah, Councillor Patel.
I second what Councillor Ashton said.
Can I just ask, we have our legal officer with us. I've outlined the position that officers are in, and to want it minuting that we will address, as we will point to the parts of the report that address D9, but I will be very keen for the legal officer to advise you on this point.
Mr. Chairman, I'm very sorry to interrupt and to speak out of line, but there are a number of backbenchers for this item. Is it not wise to allow the backbenchers to speak to add to the case for deferral?
No, Councillor Jogia, when it comes to your turn, we'll ask you to speak. Thank you.
Jimmy. Yeah, sorry, I just agree with your last decision. So I'm comfortable with the advice that Beverly has given in relation to the new policy and the insurance she's given as regards this policy already been taken into account in the initial report, and that is going to be minuted. Ultimately, it's up to members to decide whether they're satisfied with that, and obviously if they're not, then that could be a potential reason for deferral. But each individual member needs to decide whether they're happy with that. But I'm comfortable that it was quite clearly explained what this policy related to and its consequences on this particular application.
Thank you, Jimmy. Okay, should vote on the motion first by Councillor Ashton to defer. Am I right to say that, Councillor Ashton, that you would like to defer? We should take a vote on that first.
I've already proposed, and it's already been seconded. You're chairing the meeting.
Okay. All right. So I just wanted to make sure that members, now we just take a vote. Who is in favor of the motion?
I think because we don't have a sort of automatic voting button, which we need, we have to go round, don't we? And just,
well, I'll go around. Just
you're chairing it, but I just think we need to make some progress, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I start with Councillor Ferry, please.
I vote against the motion to defer, and I vote in favour of determining this application this evening.
Councillor Simon Brown.
Yes, I vote against deferring and vote in favour of proceeding with determination this evening.
Councillor Patel.
I vote in favour of deferring this application for the reasons that has been given by myself and Councillor Ashton.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I vote against deferral and in favour of determining this evening. Thank you.
Councillor Baxter.
I vote in favour of deferral for a site visit as outlined by Councillor Ashton.
Councillor Ashton.
I vote for deferral for the two reasons that I've stated very clearly, and in particular, the problem with policy D9, which I don't think has satisfactorily been addressed.
Thank you. I, as Councillor Ali, I vote against the deferral and vote in favour of determination of the application today. Thank you. Level is 4-3. Application will be heard today. Thank you. And should we take the vote on the virtual meetings, virtual site visits?
Chair.
So Keith Ferry.
Yeah, I just I remind people that my motion was that we should, until we're able to do physical site visits, that we should accept virtual site visits.
Simon Brown.
Yes, I wish to proceed with virtual site visits.
Has that been seconded, Chair?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, can we be clear about who seconded the
Simon Brown seconded.
Yes, I second it.
Okay.
Oh, you seconded it? Oh, okay.
Councillor Anjana Patel.
I am not in favour of a virtual visit because I would like to have a site visit.
Councillor Robson.
Thank you, Chair. I am in favour of us having virtual site visits until actual site visits are feasible. Thank you.
Councillor Baxter.
I, where possible, would like to have physical site visits, and for the reasons outlined earlier, I think it would have been possible to defer this and have a physical site visit.
Councillor Ashton.
It's a strange motion, Chair. I don't have a problem with virtual site visits on minor applications. They can be very helpful. You don't always want to go running around looking at things, but I thoroughly object to virtual site visits on major applications where thousands and thousands of people have objected. I think it's a disgrace. I think that the Labour councillors on this committee should hang their heads in shame.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. I favour the virtual site visits under the current lockdown conditions. As soon as the conditions allow, we'll go into physical visits. The virtual visits will, in future, will be doing it, and it's 4 to 3. Beverly, if you can make a note of that and minute it. Thank you. Now, officers, Beverly, we come to the first application, Cannons Park Station, car park. So can you have officers to brief on that, please?
That will be Nabil.
And Nabil.
Good evening, Chair, and good evening, members of the Planning Committee. Can you just confirm that you can see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so just to briefly outline the addendum items. So you'll note that in the supplementary addendum, details were provided about why the decision to move to a virtual site visit was made, and which was subsequently carried out during members' briefing. Since the agenda was published, there have been an additional 2 objections, and a further planning condition, has been included in the conditions list. So to introduce the site consists of a 162 space public car park associated with the Cannons Park underground station. It's located on Donnfield Avenue and is accessed from Whitchurch Lane. The site is owned by Transport for London, and immediately to the south of the application site, the land is also adjoined by Tfo and is currently used as the Bears Ambulance Response Service, which you can see from the photograph here. To the west of the application site is the embankment for the Jubilee Railway line. Cannons Park Station is where my cursor is here. We've got Whitchurch Parade of Shops, which is further to the west of the station. Immediately opposite the application site on Donnfield Avenue, we have 2 blocks of detached flats, which are 2 and 3 stories in height and contain between them approximately 40 residential units. End House is a residential dwelling which is located to the northeast of the application site, and Wild Lodge, another residential dwelling house, is located immediately to the north. Beyond the gap here, we have Arnold House playing fields and also the access for the bowls club and the tennis club. Importantly, members will note that the north of the application site adjoins Cannons Park, which is a Grade 2 listed registered parking garden, and the northern tip of the application site also forms part of the Cannons Park Estate Conservation Area. The application site has a public accessible transport rating of 3, which means that it's got good accessibility to alternative public transport modes. Moving on to the proposal. The proposal is for the redevelopment of the application site to provide 118 residential units across 3 7-storey buildings. The top floor, i.e. the 7th floor, would be recessed. The proposal would re-provide 60 commuter car parking spaces, which is shown here, and would be partly within an undercroft of buildings B and C. A Tfo Commuter Cycle Hub is also proposed within the ground floor of Block A. The proposal would provide 100% affordable units for the 118 flats. 22 of them would be London affordable rent and 96 would be shared ownership. The residential development would be car-free and would therefore only provide in the outset 4 blue badge parking bays. The ground floor layout shows that there would be space between the buildings. Between blocks A and B would be a communal garden for the future residents. The access to the commuter car park is between blocks B and C, and a smaller pocket park is located adjacent to the Cannons Park boundary. Public realm works are also provided, including revised floor ground surfacing treatments and additional landscaping. And you can see from the bottom plans the sort of indicative layout that would be reflected on each of the floors of the building as they go up. This slide just shows you the scale and massing of the proposed residential blocks. We can see that the top floor would be recessed, fronting Donnfield Avenue. and also the CGI gives an indication of the type of surface works and public groundworks that would be taking place. So for the purpose of this presentation, I'll provide a brief overview of the key planning considerations, principle of development, housing output. Following on from the discussions, I will touch probably a bit more on policy D9 within the townscape character and design quality consideration. So you probably have to bear with me with that. Heritage, residential amenity, and of course, transport and parking. Members will know that this planning application has received a great deal of public consultation responses. There have been 616 objections to the application and a petition of over 2,500 in objection. The application has received 8 comments in support of the proposal. So to start with the principle of development and the housing output, the application site is included as site H17 of the Harrow site allocations development plan document. The allocation is for a partial redevelopment of the site for residential purposes while retaining adequate commuting car parking provision. So in this respect, the provision of housing on the site is consistent with the development plan's broader objective to meet development needs on previously developed land and to do so in sustainable locations. Officers recognise that the number of residential units proposed would be higher than that which was originally envisaged under the site allocation. However, as was detailed in the officer report, the site allocations plan clearly notes that the housing capacity figure attributed to each site is indicative and it's not prescriptive, and that the actual number of dwellings that may be achieved on site are determined by many considerations. Notably, it's almost 8 years ago since the site allocations plan was conceived, and the development process in terms of how density and housing output is reviewed and considered has changed as we move towards the publication London plan. So the current application provides evidence regarding the appropriate level of re-provision of car parking and therefore fulfills the allocation in that respect. By providing an undercroft, there is more capacity to provide residential units above. Also, the current application represents the outcomes of a detailed design process and therefore better represents the capacity which the site can hold. Importantly, members are reminded that the overarching housing targets for Harrow within the London plan are expressed as minimum targets. Therefore, although the targets within the core strategy as it was originally formulated at that time had a requirement of around 350 dwellings per year for Harrow to meet, this has now significantly increased, whereby the publication London plan is looking at a requirement for Harrow to achieve at least 802 homes per year. Again, I have to emphasise that the targets in the London plan are expressed as minimums, and therefore there still remains a shortfall of identified housing capacity relative to housing need within London and across the country. So just to summarise on that element, as noted in the officer report, the application site accords with the strategic spatial growth and policy context of providing new housing on previously developed land on an allocated site, which is in an accessible location. In relation to density, again, I touched upon this slightly. The London plan does set out the strategic policy for making the best use of land, noting the need to enable development on brownfield land, surplus public sector land, and applying design-led approaches to determine development capacity of sites. So while officers acknowledge that the proposal would exceed the thresholds of the density matrix, which is in the 2006 version of the London plan, members would know that justification for that policy notes that the density matrix shouldn't be applied mechanistically. And as noted, the publication London plan has shifted towards a design-led approach to optimise capacity of sites. So again, to detail, the proposal has gone through a design-led approach that sought to optimise development on the allocated site. Various experts in the design field have considered the scheme and not raised any fundamental objections to the massing or the design. Officers have been mindful of this expert advice and consider that the proposed building would respond to the challenging constraints of the site and optimise the capacity for development. Although Cannons Park is designated as metropolitan open land, the application site does not fall within this designation, so the proposal itself would not trigger any consideration of metropolitan open land policies, and the visual impact has been appropriately assessed through the application process. If I just very quickly turn to the proposed housing offer, which you can see in the table here and here, all 118 units would be of an affordable tenure. The delivery of 22 family-sized London affordable rent units would meet the priority need within the borough, while the 96 shared ownership units would provide a general affordable housing offer for residents in Harrow. Furthermore, the applicant has agreed to a cascade mechanism which would offer the shared ownership units exclusively for a period of no less than 3 months to eligible purchasers whose primary place of residence or work at the date of purchasing the relevant shared ownership unit falls within Harrow. The cascade mechanism would also include an income cap to ensure that the proposed tenure represents a genuine affordable offer for housing offer for residents in Harrow. The proposal would therefore contribute to the achievement of local policies, the strategic level need for new affordable homes for London, and the government's priority objective of significantly boosting the supply of homes. If I just move on to the next consideration, which is Hedge. The map on the left shows the key heritage designations. The red outline shows the boundary of the Cannons Park Estate Conservation Area. Cannons Park Registered Parking Garden is the element highlighted in green. And within the park itself, there's certain listed structures. The St. Lawrence's Church is located here, which is approximately 350 meters to the east of the application site. Officers appreciate that many key features contributing to the significance of the park and the conservation area would largely remain, and this includes verdant views from key viewpoints and individually listed heritage assets. However, the proposed development, by reason of its siting, massing, and the absence of an appropriate buffer, would make the development visually prominent, particularly from the open parkland and zones around the Donnerfield Avenue entrance. And this can be seen in the images that are provided to the right-hand side. The severity of change experienced would be apparent, and officers therefore consider that the proposal would have a harmful effect on the setting of the Grade 2 Cannons Park and Cannons Park Estate Conservation Area. For the purposes of the National Planning Policy Framework, this harm is considered to be less than substantial. So therefore, in accordance with the NPPF, where a development proposal will lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of a designated heritage asset, this harm has to be outweighed against the public benefits of the proposal. Officers consider that the provision of 118 new affordable tenure homes in conformity with the spatial strategy for growth set out in the development plan and the other benefits detailed in the report would provide clear and convincing justification and are collectively sufficient to outbalance the identified less than substantial harm to the significance of the heritage assets. In this regard, the heritage balancing exercise as required by the framework is therefore favourable to the proposal. Moving on to townscape, design quality and residential amenity, given the long linear tapering site and the unique edge conditions to the west with the railway embankment, the proposed layout is considered to be appropriate for the site. In the context of the 2- and 3-storey buildings within the proximity of the application site, the proposed development would undoubtedly introduce a development which would be of a different scale and height and would be a notable transition from the existing prevailing building heights within the locality. This would contribute to a perceived change in townscape character from some viewpoints. However, design experts have expressed their comfort with the height, massing and distribution of the proposed buildings and the considerable thought that has gone into the elevational character and architectural detailing. Officers are mindful of this expert advice and consider that the proposed buildings would respond to the challenging constraints of the site and optimize the site capacity through the design-led approach. If you'll bear with me, councillors, I'll just try and address the points that are in policy D9 while I'm talking now, and I will perhaps have to just have a moment or two just to review the policy. So in the first element, I guess it might be worthwhile if I share that screen, so it might be easier to run through, Chair, if you're okay with that. Okay, well, I'll continue nonetheless. I guess I'll just talk through the policies. So in regard to part A, the policy D9 talks about development plan should define what is considered a tall building for specific localities, which will vary between different parts of London. Within the Harrow Core Strategy and Development Plan taller buildings are defined as those within which are 30 meters or above, and that definition is definitely carried through in the area action plan for the Harrow Weald opportunity area. With regards to locations, which is part B of policy D9, it states that boroughs should determine if their locations with tall buildings may be an appropriate form of development subject to meeting other requirements of the plan. As noted in the officer's report, there are material considerations that deal with the previously developed nature of the site, the fact that it's allocated for development, and its proximity to sustainable locations, transport nodes that reinforce the need for efficient use within this site, which is in full conformance in accordance with the spatial strategy for development within Borough and regionally within London. In terms of impacts, the application was supported by verified townscape assessments, and turning to part C of the policy, this did consider long-range views from certain parts of the public realm. I know that there was viewpoints taken from Watersfield Avenue, which is to the back of the site, the residential dwellings. This application site, this viewpoint is taken from Whitchurch Lane, and there have been additional viewpoints that were taken from within Cannons Park near the walled garden. So that demonstrates that the applicant did consider different viewpoints. Mid-range viewpoints have been have been shown also within townscape and visual assessment, and as can be seen in other images within that document, there are immediate views from surrounding streets. The officer report also did mention the emerging development context that could take place for the adjacent building within Cannons Park, the Cannons Park Close. So number 1 to 20, Cannons Park Close has permission to increase the height by an additional story, which no doubt when it's 4 and 3 stories respectively relates more to the 7 stories that are being proposed. But the report also discusses the potential that these buildings could effectively utilize if they meet the respective criteria of permitted development rights for an additional 2 stories. So the officer did report that the proposed developments should be seen in the context of the forthcoming or potential development context, and not as a standalone in regards to the existing situation. In relation to the impact on the heritage assets, I sort of covered that in my previous point, and this is part E of D9C. Undoubtedly, within certain viewpoints, particularly closer to the application site within Cannons Park, the development would be visually prominent. However, part D of that policy, D9, so part D, C, D of policy D9 also requires consideration of heritage assets in the spirit of what's also laid out in the NPPF, requiring clear and convincing justification, and that has been explored in the officer report, notably about the public benefits that would be derived. An element of the officer's report also looked at why alternative options in terms of massing could not be feasibly achieved on site to deliver the same quantum of public benefits that are being put forward in this application. The significance of the heritage site is national listing grade 2, so it doesn't go to the extent of World Heritage or outstanding universal value, and therefore part E of that policy doesn't apply. Again, it's not near the River Thames. A glare report has been provided, and that was mostly in respect to the impact for the train drivers on the embankment of the Jubilee railway line. But nonetheless, because of the siting and location of the application site away from the main road, it's not considered that the proposal would have an adverse impact, and certainly that wasn't put forward in the submitted report, that the proposal would have an adverse impact in relation to glare. And there are conditions to address lighting from the proposed development, and members will see that in the condition list. If I move to the text on the functional development, which, if anyone's got the policy to hand, is Part D9C2. The application, the officer report goes into detail about the internal and external design, and I'm aware that the applicant has considered the proposal in relation to relevant building control requirements, and that covers emergency exit routes. But if members want clarity on that, we can be minded to condition those details if necessary. The buildings would be managed by Catalyst, who are a housing provider, and they've got thorough servicing and maintenance and building management arrangements across all their portfolio of units that they manage. So in this case, the proposal would satisfy that criteria. Given the citing of the application of the proposed building, I'm looking at Part C of Part 2 of D9C. The entrance and access route and ground floor uses are designed to allow for permeability, and there's not a lot of scope for overcrowding given the layout and form of the entrances to each block and the sort of linear nature of the application site. The transport assessment, which accompanied the application site, really went into the ability for the existing transport network to absorb the number of residents that are going to be effectively put on the site with the development being complete. And studies were done of the bus network routes and also of the trains. And within the transport assessment, there are addendums provided that detail those reports and show that there is capacity for that. I guess I'll be touching on to the transport impacts a bit later, but most certainly the proposal is looking to provide modal shift and adopt a more sustainable transport alternative, and therefore there are obligations and further enhancements to cycling networks and other public transport related infrastructure to allow for the modal shift to take place. In terms of job services, facilities and economic activity, the proposal, because of its location, it's not in a town centre, it's very difficult to introduce uses that the core strategy seeks to direct towards town centre uses. And in this regard, the fact that the scheme is coming forward as a residential-led scheme with the appropriate housing is considered to be appropriate, wholly appropriate for the purposes of the spatial strategy of Harrow. Part G looks at the interference with aviation, navigation or telecommunication. The application site is not within, the closest that we have is the RAF Northolt Safeguarding Zone. The application is not within one of their key height restriction corridors, and I note that they should only be notified if the proposal is for hand gliding or any such schemes that are coming forward. In relation to the environmental impact, wind, daylight and overheating studies have been accompanied with the application, and relevant officers and experts have reviewed those and considered them to all be acceptable. And likewise, noise has been considered in detail in the application. The application was referred to the council's environmental health team, and officers have been minded to put a condition to ensure that further details and can be provided to ensure that the noise impacts of the development, both for future and existing occupiers, would be appropriate. Turning to Part 4, looking at the cumulative impacts. If you just bear with me, Councillor, I'm just trying to read this as I talk it through, so I just need a moment to digest what this is requiring.
Nabil, I'm just going to got an echo. Oh, I'm just reflect on what you've gone through in the policy in detail. Councillors, we as Nabil has gone through that, we can cross-reference the pages in the report that has covered off all of these issues. So these are not new issues to you, and they have been mentioned already in the report. I would draw your attention to the beginning of policy D9, where it is, as Nabil has correctly pointed out, it is for development plans to consider what a tall building is, and it will be for the local authorities to define that within their areas, which should not be less than 6 stories. Just by way of background, as you know, we are in the process of reviewing our local plan, and as part of that we are doing a characterisation study which is picking up this work in terms of defining what a tall building is. In terms of our own current local plan, Nabil has correctly defined the tall building as 30 metres. Clearly, in bringing forward a new local plan, we will be looking at this 6 stories and the appropriateness of that in taking this forward as a definition in our local plan. I hope that clarifies the situation a little bit, and Nabil, I hope you can now pick up on the last part.
Thank you. Sorry, I was actually having a bit of a water break. I was speaking quite a bit, so I'll just try and revert back to the policy. If you just bear with me a second. So I think part of what Beverly has mentioned is relevant to this. Given the location of, given the fact that our current development plan looks to focus and has actual definitions, and certainly within the Harrow and Woolston opportunity area looks to define tall buildings as 30 metres above. There've certainly been a lot more within that area, and so Part 4 of the policy requires the cumulative visual, functional and environmental impacts of proposed consented and planned tall buildings in area to be considered when assessing tall building proposals. There are no other tall buildings as defined in this policy, if it's considered to be 6 metres or above, that are planned within the immediate locality, and therefore the cumulative impacts of perhaps having a number of tall buildings and the micro impacts that would happen in terms of wind tunneling effects, etc., or glare between buildings, perhaps is not relevant in this regard. And in terms of public access, the residential development, which is part D of that policy, sorry, the residential buildings would be for residents only, and in conjunction with conditions for secure by design, the public access would only be for the car park, and that would be really regulated through the conditions of gated entrances, the details of which are to be confirmed through conditions. So councillors, I believe that covers all the points of the policy of D9. If you perhaps will allow me to continue with the presentation and perhaps talk about the residential impacts that have been identified. So turning into the impacts of the proposal on the residential amenity of the adjacent properties, the officer report outlines that some of the properties opposite the application site, notably the end house and the detached blocks of flats, would see transgressions in the level of daylight and sunlight beyond BRE guidelines. In relation to the site context, it is recognised that the adjacent residential properties currently experience higher levels of daylight and sunlight as a result of the absence of built massing, because the current site serves as a car park. While this accounts for greater reductions in former values as a result of building taking place on the site, the council's independent daylight consultant has noted that most of the retained values to the rooms would nonetheless be good. And, even so, it is, officers do appreciate that certain rooms would experience notable transgressions. However, taking the conclusions of the council's specialist consultant in relation to the overall percentage of units that would retain good values of daylight and sunlight, in addition to the dual aspect nature of the adjacent residential units and the need to balance the efficient use of this allocated site and other considerations detailed within the officer report. Officers consider that the identified losses of sunlight and daylight would be outweighed by the other material considerations in favour of the proposal. If I turn to transport and parking issues now, there are two considerations which I just want to quickly touch on. The first is the loss of the commuter parking, and the second is the car-free element of the proposed residential development. So the existing car park provides approximately 162 commuter car parking spaces, and the proposal would reduce this by 102 spaces, thereby retaining 60 car parking spaces. It's acknowledged that the car park is well utilised, and the submitted reports indicate full occupancy on weekdays for the majority of the traditional working day. This point has also been emphatically emphasised in several public consultation responses. A transport assessment was submitted with the application, and the Council's Highways Authority have acknowledged that the study demonstrates that there is a significant number of people currently driving to the station that could potentially travel using sustainable alternative modes such as walking, cycling, or even the bus. The Transport for London Spatial Planning Team, who are a statutory consultee for major applications, strongly support the reduction in commuter parking, which would contribute to the objectives of the Mayor's transport strategy and the publication London Plan, which supports a modal shift away from car use to promote active travel. Furthermore, the car parking surveys were carried out show that the existing parking restrictions in the road around Cannons Park seem to be working effectively. A package of measures are proposed to encourage the modal shift and mitigate against overspill parking on the street, and this includes the provision of a cycle hub, a station travel plan, and financial contributions towards improvements to the Jubilee Line route, and for further parking surveys and implementation of additional studies and requirements should they be required. The Council's Highways Authority have concluded that a reduction in the public station car parking can be accepted, subject to the mitigation measures which have been identified. Importantly, members' attention is also drawn to the fact that TfL could choose to close the existing public car park at any time, which may have a greater impact on the highways, whereas the proposal is seeking to provide an appropriate quantum of replacement car parking and provides a range of mitigation measures to encourage a modal shift to reduce overspill car parking on the street. Turning to the car-free element of the proposed residential use, this subject to further monitoring and measures which may be required to address any potential overspill on-site parking impacts. In addition to a permit restriction, the Council's Highways Authority have accepted the car-free approach. Council officers have no doubt scrutinised the submitted transport statement and concluded that the reduction in the station car parking car-free approach for the residential component and the highway works can be accepted, provided suitable mitigation measures are introduced. A package of mitigation measures have been provided to contribute to the modal shift and sustainable travel alternatives and would be secured through Section 1 obligations and planning conditions. While many residents have indeed expressed concerns at the loss of station car parking and the resulting impact on traffic and parking in the locality, officers are satisfied that the transport impacts of the development will be appropriately mitigated. The proposal would therefore align with the strategic and local transport policies as set out in the development plan. I know this has been a long presentation, so I'll just wrap it up. In terms of the planning balance, to summarise, the proposed development would make efficient use of brownfield land in proximity to sustainable public transport modes and would bring forward housing and retain an appropriate quantum of commuter parking, which would be in conformity with the site allocation in the local plan. The proposal would therefore accord with the spatial strategy for growth as set out in the development plan. The delivery of 118 new affordable 10-year homes contributes to the achievement of local policies, the strategic level need for new affordable homes for London, and the government's policy objective of boosting significantly the supply of homes. This is decisive given the acute and widely recognised need for more affordable housing 10-year homes in London. The 22 family-sized affordable rent units would meet the priority need within the borough, and the 96 shared ownership units would represent a genuinely affordable option for residents in Harrow. The proposed development has been conceived through an extensive design-led approach and has undergone robust design scrutiny, resulting in a development of high architectural quality and appearance. Subject to appropriate conditions and planning obligations, the proposal would enhance biodiversity, provide landscaping and public welfare improvements, appropriately address service water flood risk, improve drainage measures, and contribute towards sustainable patterns of travel and healthy streets objectives. Taken as a whole, these benefits range from moderate to significant in weight and can all be regarded as public benefits of the proposal. The proposal would result in less than substantial harm to the setting of Cannons Park, a Grade 2 listed historic parking garden, and the Cannons Park Estate Conservation Area. However, officers consider that the public benefits of the proposal would provide clear and convincing justification and are collectively sufficient to outbalance the identified less than substantial harm to the significance of the heritage assets. The balancing exercise, as I discussed earlier, required by the MPPF is therefore favourable to the proposal. The concerns of residents, amenity associations and neighbouring interests have all been acknowledged. The report does identify impacts of the proposed development on the amenity of neighbouring occupiers and on the setting of the designated heritage assets. However, as set out in the report, officers consider that the material considerations and benefits in favour of the proposal would outweigh the harm. In accordance with the MPPF, including its presumption in favour of sustainable development, officers recommend that the planning application should be approved. The planning committee is therefore requested to agree the reasons for approval as set out in the officer's report and to grant planning permission subject to completion of the Section 106 legal obligation and conditions listed in Appendix 1 of the officer's report. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nabil. Let's start with a question. Any questions, please, from the members? No questions? There's no question from the members. Okay, so we can go ahead with I've got two objectors, Mr. Shirley Sackfoyle and Mike Turner, and then I got two applicants to speak. So I'll start with objectors, 3 minutes each, please. Okay, can we ask Shirley Sackfoyle to speak for 3 minutes?
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of CAPRA and other members of the Stop the Cannons Park Station Car Park Redevelopment Group. Donafield Avenue is a small, narrow cul-de-sac that borders the 18th century Grade 2 listed historic Cannons Park and the Cannons Park Conservation Area. We have no objection to the principle and need for affordable housing, but this site is unsuitable and inappropriate for a development of this size. It is a gross overdevelopment that will be out of scale and character with the surrounding low-level suburban Metroland area due to its size, height, bulk, high density and lack of amenity space, with a cliff-edge tombstone appearance that would have a detrimental and harmful effect on the heritage assets of this historic park. The proposals contravene the Harrow Core Strategy Guide, Harrow Core Strategy and Development Management Policies, the draft Harrow 2030 Plan, the New London Plan, especially policies D3 and D9, and the National Planning Policy Framework that would have a major effect on the townscape, resulting in a significant visible change to the wider area. The Secretary of State for Local Government recommended that the character of existing outer London communities should be protected. It would have a detrimental, devastating and harmful effect on the amenity of neighbouring properties, especially Wild Lodge and the End House, causing loss of daylight and sunlight, overlooking loss of privacy and outlooking Donafield Avenue, Cheney's Avenue, Watersfield Way. The resident of Wild Lodge feels that his mental health would be affected by being so overlooked. There would also be a harmful effect on the immediate street scene. The local police and design out crime officer opposes this proposal due to concerns with the deep undercross being a haven for drug dealers, antisocial behaviour that is already prevalent in the area, general crime and for the safety of residents and station users after dark. The loss of parking will have a major effect on the locality for both local people and commuters from further afield, and have a knock-on effect on Wembley eventways. There will be congestion in the road from station users, delivery vans, visitors to the park and local facilities, with problems for wastelands and emergency vehicles. This proposal is also opposed by many other groups and organisations, including the Garden Trust, London Parks and Gardens Trust, Conservation Area Advisory Committee and the London Borough Harrow Conservation Officer. This development will forever cast a shadow over views which are unique within the borough. The planning officer's report acknowledges the concerns of over 2,500 local residents, as evidenced in the petition, and the impact on the area and the people who already live in it. It discounts them with excuses to benefit outrage car. We disagree with this conclusion. We urge the committee to refuse this application.
Thank you. Can I ask Mike Turner, objector, 3 minutes, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. I'm an executive member of the Friends of Cannons Park. 2,000 years of history rest within the park's boundaries, from Roman potteries, medieval tracks and hedgerows, to a still unspoiled example of an 18th century parkland landscape attributed to Humphrey Repton, a landscape thought worthy of preserving by a lottery-funded grant of £1.25 million. A Grade 2 listed park for which Oxford University has decided to develop their first GPS-assisted smartphone tour guide. Down the centre of the park runs a raised causeway, lined on either side by an avenue of oaks. This was the route the composer Handel took to visit the Church of St. Lawrence, where he played, composed and arranged works such as the renowned Chandel Phantoms, dedicated to his patron and this very park. The beautiful views he saw as he progressed on his way to the church are still with us today because they have been long protected by your predecessors on the planning committee. Now we are faced with a proposed development within 100 metres, which is so tall and bulky it would change forever this historic parkland, so high that it will cast evening shadows over the very causeway of which we speak. I will add here that there is very little on CGI from the east aspect where you're looking at a 70-foot cliff. This park is one of the few jewels in the crown of Harrow's heritage. The borough's very own Heritage Trust states as its objective, I quote, to encourage today's artists and architects of both landscape and building to create the heritage of the future whilst protecting the heritage of the past. Can you honestly believe that this proposed development represents these sentiments? The London plan published by the Mayor of London in December 2020 gives the criteria for tall buildings in section D9, pages 148 to 149. This development does not conform at all to the Mayor's requirements as detailed within the plan. Many of the objectors I represent are very well aware of the desperate need for affordable housing, but as well as giving children food and a roof over their heads, they need to develop a respect for their environment. Schools bring children to the park to show them a superb example of their local heritage. Building these apartments to this scale on this site would be no less than an act of corporate vandalism. It would be the planning equivalent of putting a knife through an old master or burning literary works. Affordable housing, yes, but affordable should not be at an excuse for desecrating what little heritage we have left in northwest London. If this proposed development represents the future, I feel deeply saddened for any future generations. That completes my statement.
Thank you, Mr. Anna. So I've got Steve Scoos, agent for applicant. 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Steve Scoos. I am the Land and Partnerships Director at Catalyst Housing. We are pleased to present to you this scheme for 118 new affordable homes in Cannons Park, which Catalyst have been working on in partnership with TfL for over 2 years. If consented, we would remain long-term owners and managers committed to the success and quality of these new homes. We invest in long-term sustainable communities. 100% affordable housing schemes are rare, even for a not-for-profit housing association, and this proposal will deliver an exceptional public benefit. As councillors, you understand the very high demand from those in housing need and those unable to afford to buy on the open market. The need is undeniable here. In London, the focus to meet housing need is to provide housing in the most sustainable brownfield locations, especially those close to public transport. In other words, sites exactly like Cannons Park. The principle of utilising the site for homes has been established through the site allocation. The delivery of high quality and beautifully designed homes here is consistent with current and emerging themes at all levels of policy making, which is supported by your officer's report. The scheme has been subject to ongoing consultation and has received positive commentary from Harrow Design Review Panel and mayoral design advocates. Whilst there is some harm, as with all developments, it is significantly outweighed by the public benefits in the view of your officers. Overall, this scheme will deliver not only much needed affordable housing, but also enhanced public realm and sustainable travel. I will now hand over to David Wakeford from TfL, who we've been working with closely to bring forward this proposal. David.
Thank you. David Wakeford.
Good evening, members. My name's David Wakeford, Senior Development Manager at TfL. To give some context to members, this is the first of 3 100% affordable public land schemes in your borough, which, if approved, will deliver over 500 new affordable homes. Cannons Park Station was opened in 1932 by one of TfL's many predecessors, the Metropolitan Railway Company, sparking the development of the area to what you see today. We believe our development continues the Metroland vision of providing great homes connected to the city by public transport. Excuse me. A few years ago, the Mayor of London asked TfL to look at our land and assets to see how we could contribute to solving the housing crisis. You're seeing the results of this today with 100% affordable housing. We, as a partnership, are committed to delivering on the Mayor's transport strategy, which, as members are no doubt aware, sets targets for London, a key one being reducing car usage significantly between now and 2041. This will help tackle the challenges of the climate emergency, poor air quality and inactivity. So we are proud to be promoting sustainable travel and car-free development here. Whilst we understand potential concerns over a reduction in commuter car parking, the reality is the impact will be minor. Indeed, we think there will be a significant benefit in terms of congestion and air quality, with 118 affordable homes in return. Only around 4% of Cannons Park Station users use the car park at the moment. This means the reduction in car parking affects only around 2% of station users. From the surveys we carried out, around 1/3 of those users live within walking distance of the station, and the majority of the rest live near other forms of public transport. A conservative estimate is that a reduction in commuter car parking leads to over 50,000 fewer car trips to and from the site every year. As for car-free for residents, not only is this supported in policy, it's entirely suitable for homes directly adjacent to a tube station, shops and bus routes. And if this isn't possible here, then where would it be? The scheme meets and often improves upon many of the core policies and priorities for the London Borough of Harrow, TfL and the Mayor of London. So in summing up, in many people's minds, this is a choice between an amount of station car parking and 118 affordable homes. We encourage members, please, to choose affordable housing tonight and approve this scheme in line with your officer's recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. We've got 3 backbencher councillors to speak on this application. So I'll start with Councillor Amit Jogia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations on your first meeting that you're chairing this evening. I wish to use this short time that I have this evening to outline my grave concerns about the application to redevelop the existing Cannons Park Station to provide new residential accommodation. Having proudly represented Cannons Ward since 2014, this is the single biggest issue that I have faced. It's an issue that has brought communities together from all backgrounds, ages, and even political divides. We've even had objections to these plans by the Labour Assembly member Navin Shah and Labour Edgware councillors as well. This demonstrates that this isn't a political issue, but an issue that has united opposition from across the community. The online petition that was submitted at full council had over 2,500 signatures and continues to grow day by day. And this is in addition to the 600 objections that the application received. As the committee knows, this is takes a serious issue to conjure up so much support from so many residents. I would therefore like to urge the planning committee to take this petition into serious consideration and not to dismiss it. This is far more than just NIMBYism. There are genuine concerns as to how this application will damage the fabric and landscape of Cannons Park forever. I was therefore very disappointed that a virtual site visit was taken on board because we were promised a visit at the last planning meeting, and this is in the minutes, not a virtual site meeting, but an actual site visit. And it's not fair that this application will possibly go through with a virtual site visit. As one of the developer mentioned, we have a series. There are a series of station developments going through. So will they also be subject to a virtual site visit, or will they actually have a site visit if things change? And as Councillor Ashton said, this is a major application. It's not just a backdoor extension. That's why a virtual site visit is not appropriate, and I'll tell you why. This is an unsuitable and inappropriate development to have in such a small, narrow cul-de-sac with limited access. The pictures on the presentation of Donnerfield Avenue were absolutely beautiful, but I can tell you it doesn't look like that in real life. I've never seen Donnerfield Avenue that clear before, and I've never seen the ambulances park in where they should be. As you will know, this development is excessive, it's bulky, it's overbearing, and it dwarfs the Grade 2 listed Cannons Park, and it's the threat to the conservation area, the last standing 18th century landscape in the borough. I mean, I don't know if the virtual site visit actually showed the beauty of the park, and during the lockdown, the park has been an asset to the community, and I'm sure many of you will have visited and could have visited it ahead of this application, because it's somewhere you can go. It's a place many seek a refuge, and so many residents are against this threat to the park. The development will also have a detrimental effect on an area that's drenched with history dating back to Roman and medieval times. Now, again, I don't know if you actually got a full grasp of this from your virtual site visit. There's prior icons such as St Lawrence's Church, the George V Memorial Gardens, and also North London Collegiate School. The presentation did say that this development doesn't have a buffer and it will have a harmful effect. Again, why a site visit is so crucial for you to physically be there and see from that location these historic special icons and the threat it will have. It's out of character with the area. Again, I don't know if the virtual site visit, you could see the impact that it would have on Watersfield Way and Cheney's Avenue. Speaking from my TARSAP hat, the drastic loss of car parking is also an issue. The car park is always full as early as 7:30 AM. It's a very expensive car park, and despite that, it's still always full. So it actually counters the argument that a lot of people could walk there, because if they could, they wouldn't spend that much money to park there. Local resident groups feel neglected and are sick and tired of being unheard. I know I'm biased and I know I'm objecting to this, but members know that each of the objections that I've raised were not part of the virtual site. I therefore urge the committee to go back to rethink and please go and visit this site in person before making a decision. I'm confident that once going to the site in person, your decision will be different. And if it isn't, then at least you know, all of the residents will know that you have a clear conscience. I therefore urge and propose a virtual, not to have a virtual site visit and to have an actual site visit before taking this decision for this very, very important application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for my time.
Yeah, can you go to next Councillor Amir Mohanchan, please? Are you there?
Thank you, Chair. There are many valid reasons to reject this application, and they're eloquently laid out in the hundreds, indeed thousands of objections that residents and resident groups have raised. I join my colleague in the calls that a physical site visit should have taken place, especially so that members could stand themselves in the park and see the panoramic view that will be irreparably damaged by this application. I would also like to touch on concerns regarding the perceived public, social and economic benefits that this application simply does not deliver. The Harrow core strategy sets a vision to the borough, a holistic vision of integrated development, and key among them is the economic benefits. TfL is proposing to erect towers with a direct design that the residents will not spend time in Harrow, that they will not support local businesses, far from it. Speaking to the Harrow Times, the head of property development at TfL said that the schemes would provide affordable homes with links to central London. Homes with links to central London, not homes that will become part of Harrow and support local businesses, but a home designed to live life in central London and sleep in Harrow. I would suggest to the committee that by the initial intention of this development, it fails to promote the vision that the council sets. This is also linking to the car-free development. The report before you concedes that such a scheme is normally not built in an area such as this, nor is it likely that residents will not have cars, as it touches on where those future residents will park. And it provides, of course, that they will use public transport, which, being on the Jubilee line going predominantly south to central London, will mean that they will go to central London rather than to Harrow. And of course, why would they schlep on bicycle up the hill to Stanmore or to Harrow, where they could take easily a train and spend their money elsewhere and not in Harrow? Another core strategy that is being neglected in the application is a requirement to upgrade Harrow's train stations. And who is better placed to do this than TfL? This application provides nothing in respect of step-free access to Cannon Park Station. Not only does it deprive the elderly and vulnerable who are less able to walk great distances of vital parking, it does not even offer them the comfort of a lift once they complete their long journey to the station. Lastly, the bulk and density of this plan in itself should be a reason for rejection. But I urge you to also consider the impact on the prized Cannon Park, that the administration itself pride itself with good reason that it is a green flag winner and it is an asset to the borough. The report before you glosses over the impact to the park and how those buildings will be visible from the majority of the park, impacting forever what is one of the most unique views and one of the most unique green spaces in Harrow. This development is bad for Harrow. It is bad for local business, and it is bad for residents, both current and the future ones that will live in this poorly designed site. And I urge the committee to listen to the valuable input from the hundreds of objections and reject this plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Amir. May I ask now Councillor James Lee?
Hi. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I want to say a massive thank you to every councillor and officer which has spoken on this, also with TfL and Catalyst, and also to all the residents in Harrow which are listening in on this. So thank you very much. It's actually with great regret that I am actually representing against the development, which on the face of it should be something everyone in Harrow should applaud, a 100% social housing development. However, if you look into the detail, you can see that this development is not what Harrow wants, and more importantly, it's not what Harrow needs. It even goes against the Mayor's London plan for London. I will now provide evidence to this effect. If you go to the London Borough Plan 2030, which was actually passed by Council last year, on page 8, it clearly states the vision for the borough. It states everyone looks after each other, we have neighbourliness and cohesiveness, sense of belonging, caring for people and the area, and resilience. This proposal has already brought over 2,000 signatures against it. It's already brought MPs, assembly members, councillors on both sides of the fence against it. This, if anything, is going to cause not a sense of belonging, but a sense of isolation within the community. I will now move on to the actual priorities which underline the council going forward. In there, it mentions The foundations for addressing our main priorities are to seek a standard for current provision, maintaining low crime levels and improving community safety. It has already been stated by the local Safer Neighbourhood team that actually this development is going to actually increase the propensity of crime. It's a high density block, and actually there's going to be areas for criminals to operate over there. If you go down the high street already in Harrow, you can already see that there's rubbish on the floor. There are actually labels on the lampposts listing illegal activities. This is just going to exacerbate the whole situation around there. Okay, next one. I'm going to go on to addressing one of the objections of dealing with homelessness and overcrowding, okay, which is also on the borough plan. So how do you tackle overcrowding and homelessness? Not by creating a massive high density property where 40% of the apartments are single person buildings over there. We've already seen via COVID that the actual properties which are causing the most issues for people are the ones which are high density with people crammed in. So this actually is not what actually is good for people. I will now go on to page 17 of the report, and I'm actually going to, for this purposes, and this will actually show very diagraphically what the actual need of Harrow is per actual plan itself. So just bear with me a moment whilst I get the IT to work. And I think this will, as they say, a picture shows 1,000 words. So let's see if this works on here. Over here, it's got a breakdown of the actual affordability need, and this is what's approved through council within the actual borough itself. You can see on 1 bedrooms, the need is actually 8%. This development provides.
But we can't see it. Do apologise.
Oh, if you need to go into the chat option. If you go into chat, there's a little icon. Can you not see it? Okay. Fair enough. Anyway, you can go and look it up on Google. And
You've got 1 minute left, please.
Okay, well, the diagram clearly shows that only 8% requirement for single beds. This actually provides 40% on that. Okay. If anything, by having such a high level of actual single bed properties, it actually increases the risk of actual child poverty and overcrowding in the area. It's very foolhardy to think that single people or couples will not want to have a family, and you cannot provide a family within single bedroom properties. This goes totally against what we say as a borough plan for families. There's no investment within this property in the local infrastructure around the area, no jobs for in the local area from this development. And finally, as I mentioned, this is due to London Mayor's plan. It actually goes against what was suitable for the area in terms of the fact it's a tall building. Documents such as the Borough Plan and the London Mayor Plan set out the Council on Housing policy. It is the duty of officers to follow the strategy and for councillors to support that strategy. The development fails in reducing crime. The development fails in providing housing to the need of Harrow Council as per plans. The development fails to be suitable for the local area by the London Plan standards. Worst of all, it fails to tackle overcrowding, increases potential for child poverty in the future, and is not what families in Harrow need. We can do better. Let's make the borough we are proud to call our home.
Thank you, James.
That's me done.
Thank you. Any comments from members? I can see Councillor Ashton's. You're mute.
Not now. Thank you, Chair. And may I say that was a very good contribution, James. Well done. I don't know where to start, really. I mean, I've listened very carefully to all the representations. And I think the thing that strikes me most of all is the total lack of understanding, both, and I say this respectfully, of course, from our professional wing and also from TfL themselves. I've got no doubt that Catalyst are good people, They have a good reputation, and I'm not going to say anything bad about that at all. But as regards some of the comments that were made about this development from the representation of TfL, how anyone can say this is high quality architecture beggars belief. It isn't. It's awful. Even if it wasn't completely out of place in this area, even if it didn't totally vandalise the heritage of the listed park, even if it was a decent development, even if it had enough family units, even if it wasn't categorised as a tall building and completely out of place, even if it wasn't contrary to policy, it is so unacceptable, even if it was more suited. But it isn't even suited. And to say that it doesn't do substantial harm to what is one of our biggest heritage assets that we have, and Harrow is running out of its heritage assets very fast. It's extremely concerning that this application, A, was applied for, it beggars belief actually, and B, that it's recommended for grant. I absolutely cannot understand how that happened. And as for the lack of parking, I mean, I understand all this business about modal shift and sustainable and this, that, and the other, and you know, nobody's arguing about that. And also, nobody's arguing that we need more homes. We do. But we could redevelop this site in a more sensitive way. We wouldn't have quite so many units, yes. But I don't think anybody would have objected if this had been done correctly. Of course we could put some homes on the site. But this is absolutely unacceptable. And Chairman, to save a lot of time, I'm going to propose refusal. Because we just have to get to the point here. And if I may, I'd like to read share with you the reason for refusal. Number one, the development by reason of height, mass and scale would be out of character, would be visually obtrusive, and would give rise to a loss of residential amenity within the locality, contrary to policies CS1 and CS8 of the Core Strategy 2012, DM1, the Harrow Development Management Policy, D1, D2 and D9 of the publication London Plan 2020, D4, sorry, 7.4, 7.5 and 7.6 of the London Plan 2016, and policy H17 of Harrow Site Allocation 2013. The second reason is the proposal would be detrimental to the setting of the Cannons Park Grade 2 listed historic park and garden, designated MOL, and would not preserve or enhance the character and appearance and views from the Cannons Park Estate Conservation Area, contrary to policies CS1 and CS1D of the Core Strategy 2012, 7.8, 7.17 of the London Plan 2016, HC1 and HC3 publication London Plan, Stanmore and Edgware Conservation Areas Supplementary Planning Document 2013. Chairman, I really do hope that this is refused. It's going to destroy the views from that park. It will be, as I say, vandalism to our heritage. It will make people's lives miserable. It will make the future occupiers' lives miserable. This is not a good development. This is not well designed. The height of it is completely unacceptable in this locality. And I just would urge members to please do not support this. We have sustainable grounds for refusal, and we should be refusing it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chairman. Today we've had the representation from cross-party. We had obviously representation from the residents, and we had a representation from TfL and Catalyst. Now, when you actually hear them all out, very clear message is coming through. This is not the right development in this place. And I think everyone on this committee should be mindful before they vote, because this is really to do with Harrow and what we want to see in Harrow. And especially after being given so many reasons for this development being in the wrong place is something that we seriously need to think about. And as far as I'm concerned, policy D9 has not been addressed properly. I know that the officer has tried very hard to explain to us, but I don't think that I got it while he was explaining to us. And if this application has been rejected or been refused by the assembly member and by the MPs and obviously all the councillors here who are done the representation, I don't see how we can actually ruin Cannons Park area for the future of Harrow residents, and especially all those residents who lives in Cannons Park area. And I still agree with my comments that virtual meeting, virtual site visit was not an answer to this major development. And I still believe that we should have a site visit. So I am very mindful, and I am asking my colleagues to be the same, that we did not have a site visit for this place, which was absolutely necessary to have a site visit, and we did not have that. I'm sure, like everybody else have to wait because of pandemic, this application had to wait as well. But I am sad that our colleagues, our council Labour colleagues did not actually vote to defer this application. So we are where we are now. But I second what Councillor Ashton has said, and I would like to refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more comments? Yes, Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do welcome in this proposal the provision of truly affordable housing, something which we all agree is much needed in Harrow and which is one of our council's priorities. But in my mind, this isn't the only or indeed the overriding consideration in any application, actually. We need to look at it in the round, and in this particular application, we need to balance the benefits of this extra housing against the impact on the local area, and do the benefits outweigh the harm that may be done to this designated heritage asset. I agree the site should be developed for housing, but I don't think I agree with the almost 700% uplift from the figure in the 2013 site allocation plan of 17. 17 isn't a reasonable number, but maybe neither is 118. But I'm really concerned upon the effect on Cannons Park, as previously has been commented in a number of the submissions here before us this evening. I do take the same view as the London Borough of Harrow Conservation Officer, actually. The proposal would greatly undermine the character of the park, given the height proposed, or the heights proposed. And goes on to say it's only a reduction in the height that could alleviate or remove this harm significantly. Now, without that consideration, I would probably support the application. I can accept the reduction in car parking. I can accept the traffic implications of that. I can accept, I think, the developments vis-a-vis the properties across the road, and I can certainly support increasing affordable housing. But the potential harm to Cannons Park, which will be irreversible, it's not something you can go back on, does lead me to support, on balance, refusal in this case, even with a virtual site visit. I was quite happy with the virtual site visit. I had no problems with it, and I do support refusal. I do hope the scheme can be redesigned to meet these objections. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any more comments? No, so we can go on the motion to refuse. Can I start with Councillor Ashton?
Sorry, Chair, just very quickly, could we hear from the officers in relation to the two reasons that have been given? I would welcome comments from the officers, and this is not to stop the vote or to cut across those reasons.
Mr. Welsh, why do you
I believe, and it's good to hear from the officer, particularly in relation to the policies, because it's the officers who will have to defend the matter at any subsequent.
Sorry,
What have you heard?
I'm sorry, we need to take it to the vote. I don't think that's
Jimmy,
Yeah.
Jimmy, I think the council officer already explained everything
Yes.
on D9.
Okay, that's fine. I was
Yes.
just expecting an opinion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Welsh, but we've heard enough from the officers.
I take it that you haven't heard from the officer that there are good reasons for refusing in circumstances. I'm sorry for the interruption.
I'll tell you that they are.
Is Beverly there? Would you like to comment?
Shouldn't.
All I will comment is members are entitled to reach the conclusions in those reasons for refusal. It is a balance. The report is balanced that officers have recommended approval. If members decide that the balance weighs in the favour, I think the reasons for, I have no further comment on the reasons for refusal that Councillor Ashton has put forward.
Thank you, Beverly.
Thank you very much.
Can we move to motion to refuse? I'll start with Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Chair. I have heard all the discussion and I vote to refuse.
Councillor Patel.
I've heard all the discussion and I vote to refuse this application, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Chair. I've heard all the discussions. I vote to refuse.
Councillor Perry.
I've heard all the discussions and I vote to grant.
Councillor Robson.
Thank you, Chair. I have heard all the discussion and I wish to abstain. Thank you.
Councillor Christopher Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. I've heard all the discussion and I vote to refuse.
So my vote is I've heard all the discussion and I would like to stay abstain. Okay, thank you. So the motion is refused. Motion is accepted, sorry.
So the application is refused.
Yep. Application is refused. Thank you. Can we move on to the next one?
Chairman, I hate to be rude, but is it possible we could just have a 5-minute comfort break?
Yes, it's what I was thinking. It's almost 8:30. 10 minute break. 10 minutes break will do.
If 5's all right with you, 5's all right with me.
Okay, let's say 10 minutes. Okay, you can make up the tea. Okay, see you in 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Untitled Retail Park. Pay is yourself. Selena, is it?
Good evening, members. Can you all confirm that you can see my screen?
Yep, we can.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you. So this application relates to Northolt Road Retail Park or part of it. There are a number of supplemental addendum items relating to this. The decision to conduct virtual site visits, which has been outlined within the addendum and subsequently shown to members. At the back of a late representation made by Waitrose, an addition of an informative to resolve matters outside of the remit of the current planning application between Waitrose and the developers has been recommended, and also revisions of conditions relating to the construction logistics plan, landscaping and noise in line with requests from Waitrose. The application site relates to Northolt Road Retail Park, the northern part. It comprises 2 large units that contain 3 retail stores, Sports Direct, Home Sense and Dunelm. The remainder of the application site is a strip of surface car parking, and it also includes part of the existing access and service and delivery road. The site does not contain any designated heritage assets and is not within a conservation area. The site is located within RAF Northolt's Conical Protected Surfaces Safeguarding Zone and is within a critical drainage area. There is an existing water culvert that runs through part of the site, primarily under part of the southern and eastern accesses. Immediate area around the site varies in character, uses and scale. The site is bound to the west by a designated industrial use area known as Bramber Road Industrial Estate. To the north is the Grange Farm Estate. I'll just show you on the map, the previous map. If I can go back, there we go. The Grange Farm Estate, and to the north there are high density developments on Northolt Road. The Waitrose site is directly adjacent with the associated car parking. The site is accessed via a roundabout off Northolt Road, and buildings on Northolt Road immediately east are higher density of up to 9 stories. The site has a PTAL rating of 4, which is considered to be good. The proposed development seeks full planning permission for the demolition of existing retail units and the redevelopment of the site to provide 3 buildings ranging from 4 to 6 stories for the provision of 191 residential units, associated landscaping, access, parking and refuse. Overall, 31 objections were received and 36 letters of support. In terms of the principle of the retail, the development, the existing use is retail, but is noted as not being within a designated business use area, town centre or designated town centre parade. By reason of this, the employment floor space is not protected by policy as it would be if it were located in those locations. As such, there is no objection to the loss of the retail use. The provision of retail residential units would help to meet the borough's projected needs and growth in the way that is consistent with the borough's spatial strategy. This includes the delivery of housing on brownfield land and directing growth to areas of good PTAL ratings. On this basis, officers consider that the principle of the development would be acceptable. In terms of character and design, the proposed design takes into account the existing and emerging context. The scale of development is suitable in relation to both contexts, addressing building heights of up to 9 stories at Eastbury House on Northolt Road and the emerging Grange Farm development to the north, which will have a maximum height of 8 stories. The heights have also been derived to respect the statutory safeguarding zone surrounding RAF Northolt due to its proximity to the airfield. Accordingly, 4 to 6 stories proposed on the site is considered to be acceptable. The entire development has been designed to minimise car movements within the site for the safety of future occupiers. It has also been developed to maximise routes to and from Grange Farm on the northern boundary. As you can see on the northern boundary, these are routes which have already been approved as part of the Grange Farm development. As part of the current application, you can see these routes have been enhanced. The development comprises 3 blocks. Plot 1, which is a linear block, and that's designed to provide a visual accessible link to Grange Farm. It would range from between 4 to 6 stories, arranged in 3 blocks, each with their own communal residential entrance. Car parking is accessed to the south of the block, below a podium, and that would be the main vehicle access to the site. Plot 2 is the pavilion block, which is centrally located in the site, and it would consist of 2 step blocks ranging from 5 to 6 stories. And then plot 3 to the north is dedicated to affordable housing. It's a muse block, and it's a linear block located on the northern boundary, comprising 4 stories on the eastern side, which would step up westwards to 6 stories. Overall, officers consider that the proposal has been well considered and would result in a high quality development that would comply with relevant policies. In terms of housing output, the proposed development seeks to deliver an appropriate mix of housing appropriate to its location. In terms of affordable housing, the following discussions have been made between the financial advisors of the council and the applicant's financial viability consultants. The LPA's viability consultant concluded that the scheme could viably afford 14% affordable housing, 16.75% affordable housing in terms of habitable rooms. The applicant put forward an offer which would deliver 20% affordable housing units, which equates to 39 units, and that would represent 25% affordable housing provision on a habitable room basis. This would exceed what is considered to be maximum reasonable affordable housing deliverable for this development, and therefore the LPA has accepted this offer, and this would be secured by way of Section 106 agreement. The proposal would have an acceptable impact to the existing neighbouring properties, namely those to the north and south, due to its large separation distances and the orientation of the blocks. The daylight and the sunlight report, which details the acceptability of the scheme using BRE guidelines, as well as due to appropriate separation distances from residential properties and the predominant nature of commercial uses in close proximity to the site, would ensure that this development would be unlikely to cause significant detrimental harm to neighbouring occupiers. All future residents would experience good levels of daylight within their units, and all units would meet or exceed London Plan standards. In terms of car parking, the proposed development proposes 67 car parking spaces, all located below a podium at the south of the site. Although this provision is low, both council highways officers and the GLA considered that this would help to encourage more sustainable travel. The highways officer states that car ownership would need to be discouraged and good access to good quality pedestrian and cycle facilities would be required. The applicant has therefore confirmed several improvements to the existing service road access point by way of Section 278 legal agreement, as well as enhancing opportunities to promote sustainable travel by providing key access points around the site. The proposal would also incorporate measures that would help to adapt with and manage the impacts of climate change. Overall, there are a number of obligations recommended as detailed in the heads of terms within the officer's report. To summarise, it is considered that the proposal would provide good quality housing on previously developed land in a sustainable location and would contribute towards a 10-year compliant affordable housing scheme within Harrow. The committee is therefore minded to grant planning permission subject to conditions and legal agreement. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Selina.
Chairman,
Any questions?
Chairman, I'm really sorry to interrupt, and I do apologise. It's just that, don't we normally go through the applications that where we've got representations before we get onto one where we have none?
I think it should be the quick one, I think. And the next we got.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry, Chairman. I've felt a bit sorry for the poor people that have had to have sat here since half past.
Hopefully, let's hope that it's a quick one, and then we'll go to the next one. Okay.
It's up to you, but I'm a little bit concerned that people are, stacked up here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to actually propose a deferral on this. I'm very happy, really, with most aspects of the application itself, but I am slightly concerned about the impact on the neighbouring Waitrose and the representations that they've made, because I think for them to have to obtain a planning permission for the reconfiguration works, which would be required for their car park, I feel we've got the order of things slightly wrong here. This is not a small self-contained site with separate access roads, and into the future, Waitrose and this development need to exist amicably alongside each other. So I was wondering if we could defer this to allow time for the necessary phasing, if you like, to be in place beforehand. But it's not a criticism of the new homes that this would provide.
Can I take the comments from officers?
Yes. So this aspect has been addressed within the officer's report. And essentially, there was a restrictive condition on the site, but it is because the site is outside of the site boundary of the developer, and the developer does not own the site. They can't be put under any obligation to attain a planning permission to reconfigure their car park. And so we've suggested that an informative is put on any grant for planning permission to ensure that the applicant does engage with Waitrose and amicably and try and talk through these issues of liability. They are outside of the remit of this planning application, and that's why we suggested an informative in this case.
Thank you, Selina. Councillor Ashton. Yep.
Yes, thank you. I mean, we're quite concerned about it actually, and please don't misunderstand. I'm very content with the actual proposal. And may I say, Selina, you do write a good report, so it's nothing like that. It's just that I am a little bit concerned about this thing with Waitrose. And I don't think that ownership and planning are actually the same thing. We know that you can apply under Certificate B for something you don't own. So what I don't understand is why we are thinking of approving this before the problem of having a viable supermarket and the access and the reconfiguration, which is quite significant actually, hasn't been sorted. In other words, it isn't inconceivable that this applicant could, if it wanted to, work with Waitrose and apply under Certificate B to sort this out. But what I'm trying to say is that I think we need to be a little bit careful about granting permissions for things whereby when you actually get to it, we haven't got our ducks in the row. And something like this is very important to the vitality of the area. I mean, it's a nice store. It's hard enough at the moment anyway, for stores to make it, good living. In terms of people attending, there's a lot more click and collect and online deliveries nowadays. But if there's going to be a real problem with the access and issues around the configuration, such that Waitrose have quite reasonably raised this with us, I just wonder whether or not we need to wait and find out what exactly it is that these people are going to do, so that when we do eventually grant this, we understand how this will work. It's about the phasing, it's about how it can be delivered, it's about its capability to be constructed, it's about how it's going to work. And I think that is our responsibility, actually. I'm not suggesting we don't determine it in February. I just think we need to just make sure, and putting an informative on doesn't do that.
Selina, can we comment on that? Can we put a condition?
Can I ask Cecilia to come in on this, as she's been involved in the...
Okay, all right.
Good evening, councillors. I think I can probably give some clarification in terms of the access arrangements to Waitrose and the servicing access as well. Selina, I don't know if you can bring up the site location plan again, and I can probably, sort of take you through it. So in terms of the actual vehicle access coming off Norfolk Road, there's no implication in terms of vehicles accessing off the the roundabout itself and getting in within the site of the car park. So the development itself will have no impact in that regard. There is a pedestrian route which is located, as you can see, probably just that little don't know if you can hover around that. Yeah, that's where Selena's pointing. That's a pedestrian access route that will provide access to the Muse House along the northern edge, and obviously in a wider context, access to the Grange Farm estate. Now, as where Selena's hovering now, the curved access route there, that's the main route that will provide access to the new development, and it also doubles up as the servicing access for Waitrose. So there's no harm in terms of their servicing and delivering. So I think to give a bit of historic background, when the estate was developed, Waitrose and the retail units, there were a number of conditions imposed as part of the outline permission, and that included obviously that that there was no that the configuration of the car park had to be approved by the council, and obviously it had to be maintained as approved. Now, Waitrose obviously will need to come in if it does require some reconfiguration of the parking spaces within their own site. However, obviously the owners of the development site have been in liaison with Waitrose from the beginning of discussions, and this is like over maybe 2 years ago. They have been in discussion. So Waitrose are fully aware that there will be some implications on reconfiguring their car parking site. Now, as Selena's has already explained, we're unable to obviously sort of enforce any conditions or obligations upon the developer to come forward to reconfigure those car parking spaces. That will be obviously for Waitrose to come forward with. And it would be an arrangement that obviously Waitrose will have to make discussions with, take those discussions outside of the planning remit and have those discussions as part of, I guess, the land transaction discussions, because obviously Waitrose still have an interest on part of the land and site itself. So those would be discussions that will be held outside of what we would normally consider under planning considerations. But in terms of, as I said, overall servicing and access, there shouldn't be any implications on Waitrose itself. There will be some changes obviously required with car parking in terms of how they're configured, but bearing in mind that part of those parking spaces also, proportion of them belong to the retail units, the remaining will be retained for Waitrose, so there shouldn't be any implication in terms of providing, sufficient level of parking going forward, and, or have any impact on the vitality of that store itself. Happy to take any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Marlene, you got your hand up?
Well, no, but I mean, let's other people go before me, because I've had plenty to say. Thank you.
Okay. Christine?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Marilyn, for acknowledging that you have plenty to say, which we all know. I actually am a little concerned. Sorry. Right, no. Apologies, Chair. Apologies, Chair. That wasn't helpful of me. Chair, I am a little concerned about the comment that there has been liaison with Waitrose for a couple of years, because clearly from this very late information that we got, it's not reached an amicable place, and so that is my concern. I mean, you can have liaison, but liaison might mean that you actually end up in a real argument. I mean, I would really want this to be settled, because otherwise we're going to end up with a situation that we get where somebody complains about their neighbour having suddenly hollowed out the inside of their house and they didn't know what they were doing. I am concerned about it, and I was feeling until I saw that information that came through that this looked fairly straightforward. It doesn't look straightforward anymore. Thank you. And apologies, Marilyn, I wasn't meaning to be disparaging in any way. Thank you.
That's accepted, Christine.
Raylene, you would like to speak now?
I think Angela's next.
Angela, can't see her hand up, is it?
I've had my hand up for a while, Chairman.
Okay, sorry, Angela.
Thank you very much, Chair. So Sushila, I wanted to ask you a question because I know the area very well because I go and shop at Waitrose and other units, other shopping places, where you were showing that there is a pedestrian access to the new development, but that is also an access to the Waitrose car park at the moment. So I am now more confused than I was when I started.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. I'll have to ask the leader to bring the site plan back up again, and I can probably
Sheila,
zoom into it.
from Councillor Brown, then you can just.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, mine was on the same lines. I couldn't quite see. I assume some of the car parking spaces outside of the retail units, Dunham and Sports Direct, are going to be part of the development. And that pathway that Councillor Patel was talking about along the northern bound of the car park site is car park spaces at the moment. It's not quite clear how many car parking spaces that relate to the retail units are going to be lost. I'm not quite clear what will be left in terms of the car park for Waitrose. And I do think perhaps it is something that we should get cleared up.
So there is currently 152 spaces which are allocated for the retail units. Those will be lost as part of the development, but all of the spaces, all the remaining spaces which are associated with the Waitrose car park, all of those will be retained as part of this application. And so this is an indicative layout of how the car park could be reconfigured should Waitrose come in with an application to which essentially shows that all the parking spaces could be retained as a result of the development.
Simon, are you okay?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah. I'm just trying to visualize it.
Sorry, Sushila, did you actually answer my question?
Sorry, I was about to answer the question. Apologies. What I was about to explain is that where the footpath is, there isn't any allocated parking spaces there. What that is there's a bit of I guess leftover scrubland which is forming part of that pathway, and there will be obviously some reconfiguration to the vehicle point there. But I think again, it's whilst I appreciate that that Waitrose are concerned that their parking arrangement does need to be looked at. I would stress again that it does fall outside of the site boundary, and the applicant obviously is not able to practically be bound to provide or to come forward with an application or be subject to a condition to to look at the reconfiguration. What they have done is they have provided an indicative layout of how parking could be arranged, and obviously our as officers have looked at it, it is appropriate in terms of how it would be arranged, and would not have an impact in terms of the level of parking and access into the store itself. So they have gone to the point of providing an indicative plan of how it could be arranged, but as I've explained, it would not be, I guess, legally possible to bind them, the applicants, to provide a plan or by way of condition or a planning obligation, because it would be too onerous to impose that on the developer. Happy to answer any further questions. Hope that answers your questions, Councillor Patel.
Yes, it did, but I'm still not very clear about it, that this is how we should move forward anyway. So I'll just leave it at that at the moment. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So, Councillor Baxter, you got your hand up?
Thank you. Yeah, it was just to say that I would still, if I've got a second at that, it's like that put to a vote, and it's not to. Oh, thank you. Okay.
Marilyn, your hand is up. Are you second it?
Yeah, I just said I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. Can you just go on the vote for that? I'll start with what?
Chair, forgive me. Could I just ask a question? Forgive me. This is ignorance, but I understand Councillor Baxter's wishing to defer, because I am also very puzzled about this and concerned. But my concern is, what would we, and this is a real concern, because I want to get this, I want the development to succeed. What would we achieve by deferring? That's what I'm asking. And forgive me for my ignorance, because I don't know the answer to that question.
Sorry, please forgive me. May I speak, Chairman? I did have my hand up, so I may as well. I think what could be achieved is that we need a little bit more certainty, I think, around how this would pan out. And it is our concern, and it is within our remit, because if we give permission for something that is very worthy and it's a good development, and I don't think anyone on the committee, unless I've got it wrong, I get the impression we're all pretty keen on it, right? But if this goes ahead and this is unresolved, and clearly Waitrose and you know, it's not terrible. We're talking about a few weeks here. Waitrose and the developer, you know, are at odds with each other. I think this is going to end up in a hell of a mess. I mean, I just want some assurance, more than an informative can give us, that this can be sorted out. I don't think it's unreasonable to defer it for a few weeks, just to get the applicant and Waitrose to work out, and then we can bring it back to the next meeting, knowing that they've come to some arrangement. Because the trouble is, you see, we do this a lot actually, and I understand why we do it. We tend to approve things with a few loose ends, and the devil's always in the detail, isn't it? It's those loose ends that can cause a lot of problems in reality, in the real world. And I think in the real world, this is going to cause problems. And I think we've got a right to know how they're going to actually resolve this. And then, when we're more assured, then we can approve it. That's all I'm saying. And Councillor Baxter is saying, and I don't think it's unreasonable. We're talking about a few weeks. This is the first time we've seen it. I just don't think it's an unreasonable thing to do.
Yeah, my comments are, I think if we defer it and if we seek the assurances, I mean, what the assurances will be legally binding? May I have the comments from officers on that?
No, they're not, but it would give us some confidence.
I mean, if it's not legally binding, then I think it will go on like that.
The challenge is we can't require the developer to do work on another site. The mechanism to do that will be through a legal agreement, but in the event that you had a legal agreement to require them to do the work on an adjacent site, you can't deal with it by condition if the site's not in their ownership. You have to look at, okay, what are the tests of that? Is that discussion necessary to make this scheme acceptable? No, it's not. Officers have set that out quite clearly within the report. There are options there that Waitrose and the applicants can take up. It is not necessary to have that discussion for this scheme to be acceptable. In officers' view, it is acceptable in its own right, and it would be unreasonable for us to refuse planning permission, which is the alternative, in the absence of that 1 in 6 obligation. We can't condition it because you cannot require someone to do work on someone else's land. I take your point, Councillor Ashton, that you raised about being able to apply for planning permission on someone else's land. You can't implement it. So it would be an unreasonable obligation on the applicant to do that. So I do take the concerns in the
refuse it. I don't think anyone wants to refuse it. We just want to make sure that we're not going to end up with a major problem. It's going to really cause chaos in an area that, you know, it's very, very important to get this right.
Yeah. Well, those discussions have taken place and no doubt will continue to take place, and there will be a resolution at a point. At this point, officers are recommending to grant permission and have done, as I understand it, have done everything they can to get the two sides to work together. The applications and the sites do work on their own and independently.
Okay. Yeah, I think, I mean, Beverly advises, okay. So, I mean, I'm sure the two parties will come to some conclusion amicably, and I think we should not really defer it for the time being, and leave it to the two parties to negotiate and reach an agreement. I'm sure they will. Yeah.
It's been proposed and seconded. If we could quickly vote on it.
So okay, your motion is okay. Let's have a vote on the motion. So to defer the application. Yeah. So I'll start with Councillor Anjana Patel.
Thank you, Chair. I vote for deferring the application, please. Thank you.
And Marilyn Ashton, Councillor.
Yes, I vote for defer. Thank you, Chair.
Christopher Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. I vote to defer the application.
Christine Robson.
Oh, I don't like this. These decisions are so difficult. Forgive me. I do not feel that this is going to work the way it is, but I do not feel in any way reassured by the officers that deferring is going to make any difference. That's what's worrying me. So I can't, I mean, I don't want funny faces again if I abstain, but I do find myself in a really difficult place here. I'm going to go against deferral, but I wish I could just do something about Harrow Council feeling responsible to get stuck in and do something about this. Sorry, that's very muddled, Chair. It just about sums up how I feel.
Councillor Simon Brown.
I vote against deferral.
Councillor Keith Ferry.
I vote against deferral.
Yes, my also opinion is that deferring will not make any difference. I think my vote is against the deferral. Thank you. Can I go on to vote grant the application, or any comments or any further comments or questions? No. Can we
get on with it, I think, then.
Yeah.
Let's vote for to grant the application. Let's start with Councillor Patel again. You're mute.
Still mute.
She's still mute.
Switch your microphone on.
Oh, sorry, Chairman.
That's all right.
I'm not actually refusing the application, but I want to be assured of the problems that we have pointed out. So I don't know what to do about it.
Chair, if I may, I think officers have fully heard the comments made by and the concerns made by members, and you have my assurance, or you can take that from me, that we will pick this up and we will take that forward.
Okay, in that case, okay. Thank you very much, Beverly. In that case, I will vote to grant the application.
Marilyn Ashton.
Vote to grant. I've heard all the discussion and I vote to grant. And thank you, Beverly. That would be most helpful if you would do that.
Councillor Keith Harry.
I've heard all the discussions and I vote to grant the application.
Christopher Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm not entirely happy for the reasons I outlined, but I do vote to grant the application.
Councillor Simon Brown.
Yep, I've heard all the discussions and I vote to grant.
Councillor Christopher Robson. Christian Robson.
I don't mind, it's all right. I could be kicked, how about that? I've heard the discussion and I vote to approve the application. And can I just say again, thank you, Beverly, for that comment that you made. Thank you.
I've heard all the application, all the discussion and consultation, and I vote to grant the application. Thank you. Thank you. We can go on to the next one. Sorry, I mean delaying the other two ones, so it took a little bit longer. And can we go on to now the next one, 201, and Lodge?
Yes, Chair. I just wanted to ask. I presented this to members in the December Planning Committee, the presentation, and it was deferred for the site visit. I just wanted to know, because we were talking about speeding things up, whether you want me to go through the full presentation again, or it was also covered at members' briefing as well in detail.
Okay, yeah. Well, are you okay with that, Madeline, or can we just, you want Nabil to just again brief you?
I don't think it's necessary, but we've got representations.
Yeah. All right, I've got one objector and applicant. So can we go ahead to give them a chance to 3 minutes each? Mr. Tfo Commuter.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you. I live in Burnell House and I'm speaking on behalf of Burnell House and Buckingham House residents. We're almost all first-time buyers. Our flats were approved by this committee, so we know the benefits that development can bring. However, this application should be refused due to its unsuitable access and loss of amenity for neighbours. The previous version of this application was rejected on the basis of the unsuitable main access. The Planning Inspectorate then confirmed that decision and dismissed the applicant's appeal. I draw the committee's attention to paragraphs 5 to 11 of the inspector's report, in which he describes, and I quote, this matter of fundamental concern, which would give rise to significant and demonstrable safety concerns. This new application has exactly the same problems. The applicant has tried to relabel the unsafe western access as the secondary access, but this simply isn't convincing. The most direct route to 7 of the 9 flats is from the western entrance. It will still be the main access that 29 of 35 residents will use, providing the shortest route to the Broadway and its covered way to local shops and amenities. It is also the western entrance that provides the most direct and covered access to the bin stores and cycle parking for all 9 flats. The applicant's tweaks to the southern entrance do not make it suitable to be the main entrance for the development as currently designed, and it will be a particularly unsuitable and circuitous route for parents with small children and people with disabilities, particularly as the lift in the southern core only goes up to the first residential floor. Ultimately, there is no reason to believe the Planning Inspectorate would take a different view of a second appeal. I won't repeat the other objections I made in my letter, but put simply, the proposed building is too tall and bulky, crammed into the site to the detriment of neighbours and occupiers. The case officer has ignored important considerations, such as many of us already having limited light with no windows in our bedrooms, the windows of Burnell House being set back in a recess, and the greater risk of overlooking for flats on the 3rd floor, which only have skylights, and the assistance of this planning authority. The officer seems to say in paragraph 6.5.5 of his report that because many of the Burnell House and Buckingham House flats don't meet London design standards, it is okay to degrade our amenity further. Surely quite the opposite. It's all the more reason not to. I'm sure this site could provide housing. The flaws for this particular application are a product of the choices the applicant has made. The applicant chose to situate the vast majority of the flats on the highest point of the site. If I were to speculate, I would say that this is to provide the most lucrative views over the London skyline. The problem with this is the highest point of the site is closest to the unsafe western entrance and maximises overlooking and overshadowing. This application prioritises the developer's profit margins over the safety and welfare of first-time buyers, both existing residents and those who would live in the development. We urge the committee to do the right thing, be consistent with the Planning Inspectorate's decision, and put people before profits. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I ask Mr. Hurst, applicant, to speak? 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, officers and members of the Planning Committee. My name is Lottie Hurst, and I'm speaking in support of the application on behalf of the applicant. The application is for 9 new homes and 336 square metres of office space in the heart of Stanmore Town Centre. Our town centres are changing, And now more than ever, development that stimulates investment, creates jobs and increases footfall has a critical role to play in making our towns resilient and vibrant. We have worked proactively with the council through in-depth pre-application engagement with both planning officers and with secure by design officers. The massing of the scheme has been reduced and the quality of the scheme, including great attention to how the building and the flats are accessed, has improved as a result of these discussions. Following the appeal decision, we've done a lot of work to get to the point where we are now, where secure by design officers are happy and planning officers are happy with the proposals. The result is a well-designed scheme with high quality materials that will enhance the architectural standards of Stanmore. The reasons for refusal related to access, they were limited to access and unit mix. A great deal of work has been done to get to the point where we are now, where these matters have been completely resolved. Care has been taken to ensure that the proposed scheme respects the amenity of neighbouring occupiers and all of the technical standards in terms of separation distances and daylight sunlight standards are met. All of the units exceed space standards and will benefit from private terraces, ensuring a good quality of accommodation for future occupiers. Planting and greenery has been incorporated into the scheme, and it will deliver biodiversity and sustainable drainage enhancements. Highways and servicing has been scrutinised to ensure it will function well, and care has been taken to ensure that policy compliant parking and cycle and storage refuge is included. All technical standards are met and there are no objections from statutory consultees. The application is in full accordance with adopted policy and fulfils the objectives of the NPPF. To summarise, the scheme benefits include delivery of new homes and new employment floor space on an underutilised brownfield site in Stanmore Town Centre, a well-designed scheme that responds to its setting and proposes good quality materials, a positive contribution to sustaining the vitality and viability of the high street, and creation of inward investment, securing long-term revenue through council tax and business rates. We hope that members can support the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any comments? Questions? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Yep.
Yeah, hello. Right. The reason for refusal that was given before obviously limits us to that which we could say we disliked about this application. I mean, if this was the first stab at it, I would probably take exception to the scale of it and other aspects of it. Consistency in planning policy is key, and so one has to concentrate on that which is under consideration now and take into account a higher authority's decision, which is the inspectorate. Now, the inspector rightly found that the alleyway that would have been used down the side where the library is would be insecure and unsafe in terms of building out crime, and therefore rejected the application on that basis. And also the housing mix was wrong, or rather, you know, the mix was wrong, and those were the two issues. And so, you know, we are now looking at an application where those things are no longer a consideration. But what's happened is that the other way of accessing, I'm talking about pedestrian access, Chairman, not vehicular. The other way of accessing the site, although you can still use the alleyway where you're likely to get mugged, of course. There's no stopping you using it. But the other vehicular access is a vehicular access. Now, it's quite busy at the moment. When the Notting Hill development is going to be built, that's going to be very busy. And it's also, I don't know if you know the area, but I do, obviously, because I live in Stanmore. But down by the side of the hairdressers there, that vehicular access is incredibly narrow. There is no way that anybody, it doesn't matter how much they try and convince me, could ever do a really safe shared surface there. And I absolutely, in fact, I was, by the way, quite happy with a virtual site visit on this one. because it depends what it is that you're looking at. But this, when I saw the video, it was actually laughable how pedestrians could actually share with vehicles this access. It's not safe. And it's not unsafe as it was with the alleyway, okay, which they can still use. But this is really inappropriate. And I'm afraid one is drawn to the reluctant conclusion that this development isn't feasible because pedestrians can't safely access it. It's just one of those things. I mean, it's regrettable, but you occasionally do get a site where it's just so awkward that it can't be developed. And I think this is probably one of them. We're not in this way anyway. And so really, Chairman, I say this, in a sense that it's a good effort, but I don't think it's workable. And I'm going to be proposing refusal on this. Oh yes, by the way, there's one thing I wanted to mention. Sorry, getting tired. Just to correct something, this is not a town centre, it's a district centre, by the way, Stanmore. I wish people would stop calling it a town centre. It really annoys me when that happens. It's a district centre. There's a big difference. The reason for refusal is as follows. This development, by reason of its location, an unsuitable shared surface pedestrian access to the site, would fail to provide a high standard of design and layout, and would not create a safe, secure, and appropriately accessible environment to the detriment of the living conditions of the future occupiers of the proposed residential unit. Contrary to the design aspirations of the National Planning Policy Framework 2019, Policies 3.5 of the London Plan 2016, DS1 of Harrow Core Strategy 2012, and D7 of the publication London Plan 2020. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Have you got a second, Christopher? Yeah. You want to speak? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to speak to second Councillor Ashton's motion for refusal. I don't think this creates a safe, accessible access for pedestrians, and I'd second her motion.
Thank you. Thank you. Any more questions or comments? So before we go to the vote? No. We'll go straight to vote. Can I start with Marilyn? Motion to refuse?
Yes, I've heard all the discussion and I vote to refuse.
Councillor Keith Ferry?
I've heard all the discussions and I vote to grant the application.
Christopher Baxter?
Thank you, Chair. I've heard all the discussion and I vote to refuse.
Councillor Simon Brown?
I've heard all the discussion. I vote to approve.
Councillor Christine Robson?
Thank you, Chair. I have heard the discussion. I vote to grant the application. Thank you.
And Councillor Anjana Patel?
Thank you, Chair. I have heard all the discussion and I vote to refuse this application.
Yes, it's my turn. I heard all the discussion and consultation, and I vote against the refuse, motion to refuse. Thank you. Can we go on to now to grant the application, the vote on? Let's start with Keith.
I've heard all the discussions and I vote to grant the application.
Christopher?
I've heard all the discussion and I vote to refuse.
Councillor Ashton?
Oh dear, I've heard all the discussion and I vote to grant. When someone gets run over, I should blame all of it.
Anjana Patel?
I heard all the discussion and I vote to grant the application, and I still believe that it isn't the appropriate
access to this development. Thank you.
I don't think you vote to grant the application, you vote to refuse, don't you?
No, I vote to.
You got on. You mute again.
I vote to refuse the application.
Councillor Simon Brown.
I've heard all the discussion. I vote to grant the application.
I've heard all the consultation, discussion, and I vote to grant the application. Haven't I missed anybody? Christine has given already. Kristen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so it's the application is granted. Thank you. We go on to the next one. Bankfield Cottages. I think we got applicant and Bagmanchester Consultant Green. So two is
that's my presentation.
Is fair, yeah. Do you want to go to the presentation? Is it?
Yeah. Share my screen.
And any? Yeah. Okay.
Firstly, there was a couple of addendum items. Firstly, regarding the virtual site visit, which we've already looked at, and also in relation to D13 of the publication London Plan and the Agent of Change policy. Policy 13 was considered in regards to its relation to the health and safety impacts of stray balls from the golf course. But it's considered that the applicant has taken appropriate precautionary mitigation measures by removing the proposed cottages from the former location to the location proposed in this application, which avoids balls from the fourth tee. So let's go to the presentation. So the site, it's located within Grimsdyke Golf Course on the northwest edge, just off Ass House Lane, which transcends from Old Reading. The former location of demolished cottages are to the north of the site. The site's within the Greenbelt and Harrow Ridge area special character. So it's proposed to re-establish a lapse commission, which was first established in 2005 and was subsequently reapplied for in 2011 and 2015 for two-storey semi-detached cottages on the site. So in terms of Greenbelt policy, it was previously deemed appropriate for 2 replacement dwellings in this location. However, there is an earlier permission from 2005 which allowed 2 replacement dwellings in the location of the demolished dwellings, and that this permission has been implemented. Therefore, as with previous approvals on the site, the Section 106 is required to ensure that only one of these permissions is built out. This protects the greenbelt, the openness of the greenbelt. So this is the site of the previous demolished cottages, and this is the new site. So the cottages are a simple design, which is appropriate in character. The layout and scale of the dwellings meet the required standards in terms of amenity. We received 15 consultation responses, a number of which were concerned with the health and safety impacts of stray balls from the golf course, as mentioned previously. But as the cottages were previously relocated to the current location in the previous permissions to mitigate against this. Just showing this photo here, this is taken from the 4th tee, and on the right here is the proposed location of the new cottages. And as you can see, there's quite significant tree cover that would mitigate from any stray balls. So just in conclusion, therefore, the the dwellings are acceptable, and there's been no significant changes in circumstances to deviate from the previous permissions on the site. So we're proposing to grant the application.
Thank you, Faye. Any questions from the members? Yes, Marlene?
Yeah, just one question. I just want to make sure I've completely understood this. So the established principle that has been granted includes, although the policy didn't exist then, mitigation, because you're saying they were moved then.
Yes, so so there was a permission on the site for replacement dwellings in the same location as the dwellings that have been demolished, but it was a permission was applied for in the revised location because it was deemed that location there was more of a threat of the stray bulls coming towards the properties.
Right, so just make sure I completely understood it. There's an established principle that the previously granted permission, let's take the most recent one, 2015,
yeah.
Even though the 2016 London plan hadn't even been adopted, has decided to satisfy this mitigation, yes?
Yes, yeah.
It was moved for that reason, was it?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it was that for that reason, but it was a practical reason that was that it was obviously deemed an issue that there was potentially stray bulls going to affect in that location.
That's the point, Faye. I think you know we actually don't know that. I mean, please forgive me. I totally respect your hypothesis, but I think it's a little bit of speculation in terms of that we don't really know that it was moved for that reason. It may well be now that I raised the D13 issue at the briefing, it may well be that suits the argument, but I just wonder whether or not it isn't really that. It just so happens they were relocated and now it happens to fit. That's all I'm saying. I just wonder what your views on that were.
Well, it was within the submitted design and access statement that was the reason for I think it was in 2008, the first time that they were relocated to that location, and that was the reason given for that first that application to change the siting.
Right, and the golf course, has there been any changes to the golf course since then? You know?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Faye. Any more questions? Can we go straight on to vote? Yes.
Councillor Green, that benching.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, my apology. I've got applicant also. Jake, can we just ask applicant to just 3 minutes? My apology.
So, Chairman, may I just interject here? Sorry, I don't think you can have the applicant speaking if there hasn't been an objector speaking.
All right. So you would like to speak first, okay, Councillor Green?
Well, I don't think I'm here as a backbencher, not sitting in the objector seat. So I don't think you can have an applicant speaking if you haven't had a formal objector speaking. If I may say.
If I can interject, I think procedurally Councillor Greek is correct.
Okay, thank you. I agree with you, Councillor Greek. So would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Chairman. And also, may I say congratulations on your new role, and I'm sure you'll do a great job. I'm speaking tonight as a ward councillor for this area to raise some significant concerns about this application. And understandably, there's significant local opposition about what is being proposed. This is one of the most sensitive areas in the borough, being located within the Greenbelt and the Harrow Weald Ridge area of special character, and in the vicinity of a conservation area, a site of importance for nature conservation and a scheduled ancient monument. It's therefore imperative that any planning applications in this area are treated with the utmost care And whilst we know there is a lengthy planning history at this site with various precedents and principles, it's also important to consider this application on its own merits and according to the policies and circumstances of today. What this application does is to relocate these cottages away from their current secluded and highly screened location into a much less suitable location. They will be directly on a golf course in the path of errant golf balls, adjacent to a popular walking route and in front of the greenkeeper's shed. Not only will the cottages be more visually obtrusive and cause harm to the openness of the greenbelt and local amenity in this new location, but crucially, the location of the cottages in proximity to the fourth tee of the golf course puts future occupiers of the cottages themselves at risk from errant golf balls. And on this point, I must take issue with what was said in the presentation, because this location is more at risk from errant golf balls than the previous location that they're moving from. And the other thing I must say is that there have been changes to the golf course in the last 5 years. It's on this point in particular in terms of the safety from errant golf balls, about the risk to future occupiers, where there have been changes in circumstances and policy over the past 5 years, which warrant a fresh look at this proposal. Experience in recent years has heightened the risk from golf balls in this locality and made them much more of a material concern. Earlier this year, a walker on Oxley Lane was struck by a stray golf ball from the same golf club, narrowly missing oncoming traffic. Efforts to mitigate this risk from a health and safety point of view are ongoing, but this incident clearly highlights the material risk for those in proximity to the golf course. Similarly, other neighbouring properties of the golf course have reported an increase in stray golf balls in their properties in recent years, following various internal movements on the golf course, moving of tees and such like, ending up in a serious planning dispute in 2018. The risks are so severe that some members of the golf club itself have written to object to this application, and they give a substantial list of concerns, including the fact that the greenkeeper's shed already suffers from a significant number of stray golf balls, and that is, in a similar location to where these cottages would be. At the same time, the new draft London plan, which now has strong weighting as emerging policy, includes an agent of change principle in policy D13. It is designed to ensure that where you have an existing environmental nuisance, in this case stray golf balls, the onus is on developers of new properties to mitigate against that risk for their future occupiers. It says boroughs should ensure that development plans and planning decisions reflect the agent of change principle and take account of existing noise and other nuisance generating uses in a sensitive manner when new development is proposed nearby. It also says boroughs should not normally permit development proposals that have not clearly demonstrated how noise and other nuisances will be mitigated and managed. It is clear that this application does not include sufficient mitigation from the risk of stray golf balls as required in this policy to protect the safety and amenity of future occupiers of the cottages. Indeed, it is difficult to see how any suitable mitigations could possibly be provided at this location in view of greenbelt and other important policies. By contrast, the existing location of the cottages provides a much more suitable level of protection. Thank you. And therefore, for these reasons, I would urge the committee to take these concerns into account and refuse this application. Thank you very much.
Can I just go to Jimmy Walsh? Applicant is raising his hand. Stephen is objecting to this application, so I would like to have your views. Will you be?
Sorry, is this in relation to allowing to speak? Do you mean?
Yes, but
no,
there's no objector. No
I think
objector,
it's correct.
but Council Greek has objected to the application. So where we stand?
Beverly's already answered that. The answer is
Yeah,
no.
yeah. I'm agreeing with Beverly's response to that. That I interject that it's about an objector rather than a ward member or a backbencher.
Right. Okay. So no, I just want to make sure, right, Beverly?
Chair, if I can clarify within the Constitution and the Council's Committee Procedure Rules, paragraph 29.6, the applicant may only make representations after any objector has addressed the Planning Committee, i.e. if there is no objector to the application, the applicant will not be permitted to speak. this doesn't include councillors backbenching on an application. So because an objector hasn't registered.
Clarification. Thank you very much. Thank you. Because applicant was there raising the hand. I just want to make sure that there's no issue. Yes, Marlene?
Yes, I mean, councillors sometimes speak in favour of things when they're backbenching. It's not necessarily going to be an objector. it's a completely different thing, isn't it? A councillor speaking. Chairman, look, we have got an established principle here that this was granted, and that was a mistake in my view. But you can't completely undo that in the context of that one has to have some consistency. So we do have an established principle, but we also have a new policy that is in now a document, the London Plan document, that carries a lot of weight. It's now the publication version of the London Plan, and policy D13 is something that I raised with the officers at our briefing on Monday. Because you know, I was having a look through and I thought, well, hang on a sec, that's exactly what's wrong with this. And the original answer I got at our briefing was, oh, well, it's all to do with noise, but it isn't. It's to do with any sort of nuisance. And I can't imagine what could be more dangerous or harmful than flying golf balls and the distraction that it might cause to the golfers. I mean, I actually know the site pretty well. And you know, it's my kind of stomping ground, and my husband and I go walking around in these areas quite a lot. So it's somewhere that I understand, know, in the context of familiarity in that way. And I honestly, with this new policy, think that we do actually have to reject this application because there's been no effort made, you know, under the auspices of this new application to offer proper scientific mitigation that stacks up as to exactly how we can, you know, protect the future occupiers, to protect the visitors, to look after the golfers. And in fact, I really think that these properties are completely out of order in this place. And so I'm going to propose refusal. The proposal, by reason of its close proximity to a golf course, to place in harm's way the future occupiers and visitors of the site and cause a distraction to golfers. And there has been no information offered by the applicant to demonstrate that measures are in place to mitigate potential safety concerns. Contrary to policy CF as one of the core strategy, and contrary to policy D13 of the publication London Plan. Thank you.
Mr. Second, Councillor Anjana Patel.
Thank you, Chair. I second that. Actually, I just wanted to I have a couple of comments that I want to talk about. I have never seen anybody building cottages on golf course in the way that we have seen it over here. I mean, where the cottages were previously, it was a bit more secluded and maybe a bit safer. But where they are proposing to build, I personally feel that is ever so dangerous for people living there. And we don't know, it's going to be cottages 2-story, children may be playing outside or whatever. This is very dangerous, and I've already had a complaint about the walkers. One of the walker being hit by the golf ball on one of the streets. So this is absolutely dangerous. I've never actually heard of this. So I'm very worried about this development. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you just
excuse me, Chair, just to intervene. As the time is going towards 10, can we please agree?
Yes, so we got bulletin at 10 p.m. Can you extend it for another 15 minutes? I'm sure the next two items might just take time.
I'm sorry, I do apologise, Chairman. It's just that I think if we extend it for half an hour and we finish in 15 minutes, that might be more sensible.
Okay, thank you. I agree. Thanks, Sam. Thank you. Can we go ahead with the motion to refuse? I'll start with Councillor Ferry.
I vote against the motion to refuse, and I've heard all the discussion.
Councillor Christopher Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. I've heard all the discussion and I vote for the motion for refusal.
Councillor Anjana Patel.
Thank you, Chair. I have heard all the discussion and I vote for the motion to refuse the application.
Councillor Christine Robson.
Thank you, Chair. I have heard all the discussion and I vote for the motion to refuse the application.
Councillor Simon Brown.
Yeah, I've heard all the discussion and I vote for the decision to refuse.
It's myself now, so I've heard all the discussion and I would like to abstain. Thank you. The application is. Yeah, oh, sorry.
Oh, no.
You're always first, Marilyn. Okay, Marilyn, go ahead. Because the problem is, I mean, usually I should see the videos, but.
Right, I've heard all the discussion and I vote in favour of the motion to refuse. Thank you.
What the decision is I think is the motion is motion to refuse is granted. Thank you. So we go to the next one now, which is 203. 203 is I think it's Carnage House, and officers Kimmery.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
My screen, which I hope you can see now.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So the site here is Carnegie House on Peterborough Road. The original building is this one right here. Now that was converted to residential flats under a prior approval application some years ago. There was a follow-up application to create an extension in this area here in the red line boundary. That was also granted. Now the application we're dealing with tonight is for approvement of changes, minor details to the approved extension to the building. The changes to the, oh, pardon me, I've got this in the wrong mode. The changes that are proposed are, first of all, to alter the locations of the electrical substation and part of the waste storage. As currently approved, there's an outbuilding here with waste storage and a substation here within the building. This proposal would move some of the waste storage here to the building and the substation here to the outbuilding. You can see the elevations here, the outbuilding and the area where the substation is now. This is what it looks like as being built on site currently. This is the outbuilding, and you can see that the gardens are behind it. The other change is a very small change to the layout of the parking area, which our highways officer has said she is content with. With regards to the location of the substation, we have received a noise report and our environmental health officers have reviewed that and are satisfied that it would be acceptable. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimmery. Any questions, members? Hi, Christine, you got the hand up. Christine?
Sorry, Chair, I didn't know I had my hand up.
So there's no questions, so can we just go straight away on to vote?
Oh, I've got my hand up, Chair.
Right.
I'm so sorry, I've got my hand up. I won't keep you very long because it's very late. I think we're all tired. Just to say that I called this in and there's a reason why. I'm sorry about it, but can I just say this? I have received, and I'm not a Green Hill councillor, umpteen complaints from a lot of residents abutting the site about the conduct of the developer. Now, one has to be careful what one says, and I'm going to be. But all I can say is this. I called this in because I wanted to make sure it was correct, and I wanted to make sure we were getting it right. And actually, I think we are. Now, it's not that. It's fine. And Kimberly, you know, that's not a problem at all, okay? But it's just that we must make sure this is done correctly and make sure we keep an eye on it, because I don't think I've actually had so many complaints about things, you know, to do with the conduct of the people building the site. And I know that Sue Anderson had met up with the local residents as well. So you might know about it, actually, if it's in your ward, Chairman. And I do
you're correct.
I'm sure you do. Please forgive me. And you know, if I'm speaking out of turn, I do apologise. I don't mean any harm, but it really has been a terrible time for these people. So this was just a belt and braces exercise to make sure that it's a, you know, a sound determination, and I think it is in terms of the planning policies and so on. But I've just flagged that we need to keep an eye on it to make sure everything's done correctly, because I do feel really sorry for people. They've had a shocking time. Thank you.
Thank you. Camry, can you just make a note of it, please?
Sorry, me?
Yes.
What
Council Ashton has mentioned that, I mean, whatever the disturbances residents having, so developers just make sure of that.
Well, when I dealt with the previous application, the primary issue that was raised to me when I had phone conversations with residents was that the waste storage was not being handled properly. With the building of this waste storage, that should take care of that issue. And we cannot use planning applications to attempt to control or punish behavior, even if the developers have not been good neighbors.
Of course not.
So.
Absolutely not. No. And please forgive me, I didn't suggest that. But it was just a belt and braces exercise. I the risk of repeating myself to make sure that this was correct, because it has been horrendous.
I am always very careful to make sure I'm correct with all of my applications.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you. Can you go?
I hope you're assured by that.
I'll start myself. I've heard all the discussion, and I vote to grant application. Thank you. Christine?
Thank you, Chair. I have heard the discussion and I vote to grant the application. Thank you.
Anjana? Still on mute.
Sorry, Chair, I was running out of battery, so I had to put plug it in very quickly so that I'm not cut off. I've heard all the discussion and I vote to grant. Thank you.
Keith?
I've heard all the discussion and I vote to grant.
Christopher?
Thank you, Chair. I've heard all the discussion and I vote to grant.
Ellen?
I've heard all the discussion, Chair, and I vote to grant.
Simon?
I've heard all the discussion. I vote to grant.
Good. Application is granted. Thank you. So the last one is 204, number 10, Christchurch Avenue.
That's me again.
Hey.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So there was just one addendum item for this proposal. An extra condition was added for a pre-commencement condition for a management plan to include supervision measures for the children. Okay. So the site, it's a detached two-storey dwelling on the north side of Christchurch Avenue, which is on the corner plot. And it's proposed to change the use class to C2 care home to house up to 3 children in need of adult supervision and care where their parent or guardian can't provide it at the current time. The children will be aged 11 to 16 years 16 years old, and there'll be up to 3 members of staff at any one time, and these numbers will be controlled by condition. It's just wanting to point out that there is some ambiguity as to whether a change of use would be required, as it would depend on the level of care required for each individual child. It was therefore advised at pre-app stage to submit a change of use application to cover all eventualities. The garage is to be converted to a living accommodation, which involves the insertion of a window on the frontage, but this is the only external change, so the property would remain entirely residential in appearance. So therefore, in conclusion, the activity associated with the change of use would not be over and above what would be expected from a family unit, and the impact on the character of the area would be acceptable. So recommending it for grant.
Thank you, Faye. Members, any questions? No? Can we straight go on to grant? So I start with myself.
What about comments?
Yeah, I asked any question or comments, you know, so.
Oh, no, you didn't. You just said questions. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, comments. Okay. All right.
All right.
Getting late, tired.
Everyone is tired. Chairman, I thought this because I was first of all concerned, not concerned, a little surprised that actually this was a planning application, but I understand why it was now. And also, we've had a little bit more information given to us because I asked some questions at our briefing about nomination rights and the things that go with this type of application. And I am a little bit worried about it. And I know that social services are concerned about it. And I just wonder whether or not we might want to defer this and do a little bit more work on exactly what this is going to be and exactly how it's going to be nominated and exactly how it's going to be managed. I'd like to know how it's going to be managed before I put my hand up for it. I'm not saying I want to refuse it. I don't necessarily want to refuse it because we need, you know, accommodation like this. I'm not suggesting that. But I'm, again, I said this before tonight in a different context, slightly concerned that we tend to grant things and stuff a condition on when someone asks a question, and never actually do the sort of homework that you need to do to find out how this is going to be managed, because it is about the change of use. You know, this isn't sui generis HMO, which it could be with no permission for 6 people and under. This is a change of use to a care facility, C2. It's a planning application. We have to judge it as we see it. And I've got to say that at the moment, I'm not satisfied with the information that we've been given about how this is going to be managed. And I think the committee has a right, as a planning consideration, to change this use in a residential area like this, to understand exactly what this is going to be and how it's going to be managed before we grant it.
Thank you, Marlene. So, Faye, have you got any comments? Answer to that?
Well, the applicant has provided quite lengthy supporting information regarding the numbers of staff and the ages of the children and what kind of supervision they're likely to require. So, I mean, we think we've got enough information to determine the application. We've added the condition to find out more information, and I think that the information that we would get from the management plan would be something that they would gather close when the application is when they've had a chance to assess what they're actually going to provide for the children, what children are likely to be needed to be accommodated.
The thing is, sorry to interrupt you, Faith. Please forgive me. It's just that's the point I'm making. I just don't want to put the cart before the horse. I'd like the committee to be able to have a look at the management plan before we grant it. I don't think that's so terrible. We haven't really got one. And once we've granted it, it's very difficult. We can't put the genie back in the bottle. That's all I'm saying. I mean, it's not a terrible thing to leave it a few weeks and make sure it's okay. That's my proposal.
I got Ola to come on to that.
Good evening, members. It's just a quick point, really. In relation to the management plan, the alternative is members to approve subject to the condition and call back the application in relation to the management plan to be considered at planning committee when it is submitted to get the assurances that you require. And if you're not satisfied with it, you can refuse it. It can be refused, I should say. And then clearly the application wouldn't be able to be implemented because they wouldn't be able to implement the permission without getting the details of the condition agreed first. So it's a two-step process, essentially.
I could live with that.
Good. Anjana, you got hands up? Yeah, Anjana.
I have got a comment to make. This is actually a 3-bedroom accommodation, correct?
Yes, three bedrooms.
And it says at any one time there will be 6 people because 3 people will be looking after the other 3. That's what it says, isn't it? At any one time there will be 6 people.
Up to 3 members of staff, depending on the requirements of the children.
Yeah, so that's a total 6 people altogether.
A maximum of 6. I mean, it could be 2 members of staff.
And if it's only 3 bedroom, I'm sure if somebody is there in the evening or doing a night shift, where is that person going to sleep?
There isn't. Maybe if I bring up the.
And actually, I did ask a few questions at the briefing as well. Ola knows about it. And I'm still concerned about what I have raised at the meeting. And obviously, the social services are not 100% happy about it either. And I personally feel that we should be doing the application right way around, get the information first and then approve it, not approve it and then get the information. Thank you.
If I can just say, sorry, just in relation to that particular question, the details of the management plan would require clarification regarding the sleeping arrangements in that respect. Furthermore, there are other licensing agencies that are required as part of the application process for a care home or a care facility such as this. So an example is they would be required to be registered with Ofsted, and those of you who are familiar with the Ofsted process will be aware that it's a very rigorous application process with DSB checks, checking the sort of backgrounds of the relevant people who are working in the facility, inspection regimes, and other such matters. Now, those things fall outside of the planning remit clearly, but as a way of giving you some assurances, getting planning permission is the first step in a longer process for the applicants to be able to actually open the facility. So it is highly regulated. It's not something that just gets planning permission and then they go off and do what they want to do. So it's more like a 2 or 3 step process essentially for the applicants, and getting the principle set in terms of planning is the first step. So yeah, so that hopefully that gives you some assurances in relation to those matters.
Thank you, Ola. So yes, Marian.
I'm sorry, Chairman. I just think that Ola came up with a really good suggestion. I mean, we could approve the change of use if we wanted to, but it falls in accord if the management plan falls apart. In other words, we get that discharge back to the committee. We could do that. I mean. I'm not really very happy about it, I have to be honest. There aren't, in my view, any planning reasons for actually refusing this change of use, in my opinion. However, I am very concerned that we don't have enough information And in a way, that can be a reason for refusal. It can be, but it's not a great one. So I think we could if members wanted to grant it if they wanted to. I'm not sure I do, but if they wanted to, they could, and then we could get the management plan back. And if that's not satisfactory, then it does. Have I got that right, Orla? Then it doesn't fly.
That's right.
Yes, correct. So officers would consider the details clearly and make a recommendation. We would then send that to committee, and the final decision would rest with the committee. So we could note if the resolution is to approve the application this evening, it would be subject for the details to come back to committee whenever they're submitted for final determination.
Yeah. Thank you, Orla. So can we go ahead to approve the application, grant the application subject to all the conditions, management plan and other bits and pieces are agreed, and then it can come back to the committee if there's any problems or issues, and then we'll refuse it. Thank you. Am I right to see for this? Helene, do you agree with me?
No. Want me first?
Yeah.
Abstain.
Anjana?
I've heard all the discussion and I abstain because I don't think there is enough information.
Simon?
I've heard all the discussion and I vote to grant.
Christine?
Thank you, Chair. I've heard the discussion. I vote to grant on the understanding that it is brought back, as Orla has suggested, for review once we have the management plan. I don't know, is that a sideways move?
Yeah. Keith?
I've heard all the discussions and I vote to grant.
Christopher?
Thank you, Chair. I've heard all the discussion and I vote to abstain.
I've heard all the discussion and vote to grant subject to the management plan and other conditions are met. Thank you. So application granted subject to all the conditions we have discussed. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. It's a long evening. And for me, it might be a good experience for the time being.
God bless you, Chair, and thank you, and good night, everyone.
Good night.
Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, officers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night. Bye, everyone.